All right, Jake. We should and could start with Cody, Randy, and all that. Let's not. Let's start with Sami Zayn, just to be different. Sami Zayn winning the United States title tonight from Carmelo Hayes, and then Nick Aldis announces or tells him afterwards that he will face Trick Williams at WrestleMania. So we have a new match at WrestleMania. I think a fresh match, a good match. The Sami storyline has been fun. And tonight he was informed. He watched Nick Aldis inform Trick Williams that he's impressed with him and he's putting him on WrestleMania. And then Sami said, well, am I on WrestleMania? And Nick Aldis goes, no, you've been losing, which is nice. You lose, you don't get on the card. And Sami said he had an idea, and he answered the open challenge, beat Carmelo Hayes with some shenanigans by Trick that he took advantage of, but not in a way that you can blame him. He's not just going to forfeit the match after an inadvertent punch, but a little bit of a moral dilemma in terms of whether he should celebrate as much as he did, or express regret or whatever. But he seems very happy that he's going to make it to WrestleMania. I like the Sami storyline. I still think it can go a variety of directions. But what did you think of this chapter?
I think it went well. Carmelo Hayes probably isn't going to take it lying down either. He's going to have an issue with Sami for celebrating the victory the way that he did after Trick's interference, and of course Trick inadvertently takes out Carmelo in the process, aiming for Sami. So I wouldn't be surprised if that match ends up being a triple threat, perhaps, if they have a plan for the next couple of weeks to have Carmelo insert himself. And they don't really have anything going on for Ilya Dragunov either. And so
I was just going to say,
are we going to end up with more than 3? I don't know. So there's seemingly multiple kind of streams at play here. But in terms of what Sami had going on, I think his frustration kind of leading to him accepting an open challenge match and then inadvertently backing into a win kind of sets him up to potentially lose the title at WrestleMania and then kind of resume that story post-Mania. So I think it all fits into him likely being one of the guys who ends up in Money in the Bank in a few months, for instance.
What are the pros and cons of adding Hayes and potentially Dragunov to the match? Not in terms of, I prefer one-on-one instead of 3 or 4-way. That's how I am in general. But in terms of storyline possibilities, because fans really like Sami. They also really like Trick, by the way. They shouldn't. Trick's not doing enough to fend that off. I don't know if he could without it seeming forced. That's a whole other conversation to have. But if you add Hayes and Dragunov, you've got 3 baby faces and a popular heel all facing each other, which in some ways is bad, but it also takes away the idea that you're it's like a 3. You still have a heel outnumbered 3-1. I mean, that's still there. And that's kind of a negative when you do a multi-man match. Generally, you want it to be 2 heels, 2 faces, or 3 heels and 1 face, just so there's some sympathy there. So I'm just talking through it. That's a little bit of a problem. Just also storyline-wise, then it becomes about the U.S. title more than Sami Zayn, I guess, defending it one-on-one and giving Trick kind of a singular showcase match. And then you also just have the idea that if Trick beats Sami for the U.S. title and it's kind of an attempt to elevate Trick Williams, I guess I'd rather have that be a one-on-one match and just have it be about those two and not have Dragunov and Hayes in the mix. So that's kind of my initial talk, kind of talking through it or thinking through it out loud. Jake, what do you think the pros and cons are?
I guess my general principle on these types of things is that I prefer singles matches just to multi-man matches, just from a psychology standpoint. But if you're looking at it holistically from this is a show that's going to have a lot of moving pieces. I think having a match like a fatal 4-way, for instance, between the 4 guys that we're talking about would give a little bit of a different flavor to that match in comparison to a lot of the bigger singles matches that are happening elsewhere on the show. And so if you want to drive a match at a faster pace, if you want to do bigger spots, if you want to, give all 4 of these guys who, admittedly have love-hate relationships with each other and, a mix of respect and maybe a little bit of jealousy at times, as well as wanting to just have all 4 of them on the show because they've had excellent performances over the last 6 months and maybe they've earned it. I can see why you would come to that conclusion, but I think the downsides are, it does make the storytelling muddier just by nature. You know, you're adding 2 additional people to the mix. You want to have them all coming into the match with the story, and it divides the time that you can spend on any one of them. So, you know, it's more complicated that way. So I think those are the major pros and cons. If I was a betting man, I'd say we're probably getting a triple threat or perhaps a 4-way. And but I wouldn't be angry if it just ended up being Sammy and Trick. I think that's a perfectly fine match, and one that they've had enough of a creative attention paid to over the last couple of months on SmackDown. So I'm not mad either way, but I think Mello and Ilya had, you know, really good runs with the U.S. title, and perhaps, you know, have earned a spot on the show.
Yeah, I think another way to look at it is just, does have Carmelo and Dragunov earned, so to speak, a WrestleMania match, a spotlight match at WrestleMania? And if it's, you know, what's the reason for them to have a match against each other again? They could manufacture that, I guess, in the next couple of weeks. Or is the logical place for them to be putting them in a 4-way? Now, I don't believe matches should be booked. I think matches should be booked for fans, not for wrestlers. But it's not a zero consideration, you know, like, and I think it plays into what you're saying. If most of what they have on WrestleMania is one-on-one matches, then a triple threat or a fatal 4-way adds a different flavor to it. So I think a lot of that can work. Mike Steff in the chat says Sammy didn't need to win the title. A match with him and Trick would have sufficed. What do you think about that? I mean, we haven't covered that. What is it? Could they have told the story differently than Nick telling Sammy you can't be on the show, and Sammy wins the U.S. title to sort of force himself, for lack of a better term, onto WrestleMania, or give all this, you know, the rationale he needed to put him on the card? You could tell a different story and do a non-title match between those two and tell Sammy's story. It's not fair to judge before they play this out for the next several weeks, and also just what they do right after Mania. But I mean, I think Mike Steff has a point. You could have had a story that led to Sammy and Trick without the U.S. title on the line, for the sake of Sammy's story. I think if part of their goal is to start telling the Trick Williams story, and Sammy has an equally important story they're telling that will be more parallel, and more about him losing to Trick, then it makes sense to have the title on the line, because then Trick winning the U.S. title becomes part of Sammy's disappointment again.
Yeah, I think Sammy's story is really centered around his inability to win the world championship. And he's declared his interest in that multiple times, and he continues to come up short when he has opportunities. And we were seeing that frustration boil over in his relationship with Cody Rhodes. And I think him falling back into the U.S. title picture is just a result of Trick Williams coming onto the scene and suddenly having all this success that Sammy just couldn't seem to find. He just didn't have the juice for whatever reason. And Carmelo Hayes and Ilya Dragunov had, you know, they've been feuding over that United States championship. And so, you know, if Sammy is going to be in that picture for that match, I think you can tell parallel stories. One where Sammy, you know, continues to struggle in his search for a world championship win, and maybe that includes losing the United States championship at WrestleMania. But I think you still want Ilya and Carmelo Hayes to be a part of that picture too. And so, you know, I think it's possible to arrive at a fatal 4-way rather than a singles match here. But I think having the title involved saves it from being a match on the SmackDown before WrestleMania. You know, so I think that's really what this becomes. It's like the lever to keep this from being a SmackDown main event on the weekend of WrestleMania is just having a title involved in the first place.
It's pretty close to where I was going to go with this, which is people who are fans of secondary titles are going to be happy the U.S. title not only is on WrestleMania, but it doesn't feel like charity. Like it's two wrestlers who fans are invested in right now. Speaking of which, Paul Driver Pete says, I love the Trick push. Fan support is undeniable. What do you think about this, by the way? Like Trick's fan support. I mean, he's got a song that's fun to sing along to. There's a joy of performance to him that I think fans are into. There's a cockiness that doesn't cross into, being abrasive for what fans look for in a star. Should they be fighting the tide on this one, or should they be kind of having an exit plan from framing him as a heel coming out of Mania, perhaps? You could even do a double turn with Sammy and Trick if you wanted at WrestleMania, or, the Raw after Mania, or a week later. So, talk about the Trick side of things.
I think Trick Williams is just he has that instant charisma that is very difficult to capture. It's a gift that few people have. We've seen very talented wrestlers, come through the NXT program and then make it to the main roster. And despite having a lot of potential and then having a lot of buzz about them because they can deliver good matches in the ring, they just don't translate to the bigger stage because they don't have that presence. And Trick has that presence. And even if you don't think he's the greatest in-ring worker in the world, I think he more than makes up for it with his personality and the projection that he can give in those big arenas.
He's a better fit on the main roster.
Yeah, he feels like he fills the space. He's not somebody who struggles to be active and to capture what's necessary to reach the people in the upper deck, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, there are just some wrestlers who are better fit on a big stage in a big arena than they are in the NXT setting, in part because their in-ring skills are less than their charisma and their ability to fill that space and own the big stage, which he does. Some other chat comments here, and then we'll move on to other topics. Derek Mitchell says, I always was thinking the U.S. title was going to be defended on SmackDown before Mania, but with tonight's announcement, it will be defended at Mania. Mike Steff, in response, says, it also reinforced the feeling that Mello and Dragunov are thought of as just being mechanics. When we talk about they belong on WrestleMania, and they earned it in the sense of having really good matches, and I think that they're over with a crowd to a degree. And I'm not ruling out that they don't end up on WrestleMania, but not necessarily against each other either. I mean, I think that there are other options for them. It would be a little bit rushed if they went a different direction, but there's just enough time to perhaps tell that story. Yeah, like Goodfella in the chat says, I didn't think about an all-time greatest of this generation NXT champion match between Elio, Mello, and Gunther, but he deserves to be the U.S. champ. Picture he's carried and entertained us. What about Gunther's looking for an opponent for WrestleMania? Maybe Gunther makes it, and it is Gunther Dragunov or add Mello to the mix too and do a triple threat. I guess there wouldn't be a title on the line, but that's a way to get Gunther on the card. That's been an issue that has been talked about, understandably so in recent weeks. Gunther should be on WrestleMania, not because the man deserves, Gunther, the person deserves it. I mean, it's not a negative, but that shouldn't be the only reason. But if you want him to be perceived as a top star, and he's left off WrestleMania voluntarily, you're sending a message to the viewers. He is not enough of a priority for us to book around. And whatever excuses there are with injuries to Ray, if they were going to go that direction or whatever, it still symbolically defines him down if he's not. Although you could argue if he's not in a good match at WrestleMania, it'll define him down, almost as much. Your thoughts on that option, Jake?
I mean, I've loved the Ilya and Gunther matches we've seen, in all of their forms, whether it was in NXT UK or the matches that happened in NXT in the US. When they have a war, it's like, follow that kind of thing. Where I think it's kind of almost risky to put together, because if you put it on in the middle of the show, I guess maybe having a show stealing match isn't necessarily the worst thing.
Yeah,
I think there's certainly a downside to having them peak and the main event doesn't measure up to something that happened in the middle of the show. But I would rather see Gunther and Ilya have a singles match if they're going to put that match together, and you could add Carmelo to the Sammy and Trick match, because I think it might be a better fit there. If that's if you want to find somebody for Gunther to face, it's hard. I'd be hard pressed to come up with somebody better than Dragunov.
And if you're Paul Levesque and you're just trying to curry favor with the ardent fan who's a little disgruntled with WWE right now for some various reasons, gifting them that match on the big stage of WrestleMania actually is with a segment of the fan base, it is a ticket mover. Like, I need to be there at WrestleMania. See, if you follow their journey, I can imagine you going, I need to be there for that. I don't know. They'd have to announce pretty quick for someone to make travel plans, but there's some, it's not tens of thousands of people or anything like that, but there's an audience out there who would be like, okay, now I want to be there for that. Some other chat comments. Derek Mitchell says, it seems like most of the matches are one-on-one. I wouldn't be upset for a triple threat or fatal four-way, but it needs to be creative with less than 3 weeks to go. Absolutely. Forrest Malone says, for the first time and maybe forever, the Brock Lesnar match is the most exciting for me to see. We'll get into that as sort of the context for everything at WrestleMania, but it plays into the notion that they got to add some stuff to this card to, have it reach WrestleMania level for a lot of people. Mike Steph says the story they've been telling about Sammy has been about him not winning the big one, not just getting to Mania. Interesting point. I mean, winning this is sort of they've told the story before. Oh, I'm that whole John Cena thing that was just ridiculous. Oh, I'm not going to be on Mania, and it's like, yes, you are. No one's buying your options to be on WrestleMania is over. A few years ago, they did that. But they have told that story with other wrestlers. And with Sammy, it's believable they would have left him off. I could have seen that being the story. Like he's so frustrated, and that plays into it. Now, something could go wrong between now and Mania, by the way. I mean, let's not. I mean, he could do a U.S. Open title challenge, lose to Gunther, by the way, and then it ends up being, Carmelo against Gunther, or whatever. I mean, there's a chance that Sammy's glee in winning, we are prematurely saying that this will last because this is the U.S. title. It's defended a lot. Sammy might defend it and lose it and be off Mania. And that could be the way they get Gunther on the card. And that would also explain entirely why, why we haven't had any movement on the Gunther front in the meantime, because they just kind of want to save him for the OMG moment of him being the entrance when Sammy says, I'm going to be a fighting champion. So that's not a spoiler, but it could be a spoiler. That I could see something like that happening. And then they go right back to the story of Sammy didn't win the big one. He won the U.S. title. With help from Trick. You could still do Sammy against Trick, by the way, without the U.S. title on the line, and then just have Gunther defend it. And we kind of go full circle back to the previous chat comment. Jake, any thoughts on that array of paths?
I mean, I think Gunther needs a purpose at this point. Like it does feel like he's sort of wandering in the desert, waiting for a story to sort of land in his lap. And I don't know if maybe the Ray thing fell apart because of injury, or
he's got the rib injury. I think. I mean, I don't think Ray's going to be cleared, but if he is, they could just go back to that. That's worth parenthetically saying.
Yeah, and it doesn't really follow on from the previous story that he was telling, which is all about retiring greats. And so I don't know if they're back at the drawing board, if they're going to have him insert himself somewhere else. But I do like in principle him showing up and winning the U.S. title and then going on to face, whether it's one or two or three opponents at WrestleMania. That's fine by me. I mean, I think it would end up being an incredible match. Anything he's a part of, particularly if you can add people like Carmelo Hayes or Ilya to the situation, would make it even better. So I think all those ideas are plausible. I think the one that holds the most water to me, at least just based on the amount of effort they've put into it on television, is adding Carmelo to the Trick and Sammy match, and I think they'll have to find something else for Gunther to do. I think it would feel, I guess it would be an OMG moment, but I don't know. It feels like you'd be lowering him a little bit to put him back in that position in the U.S. title picture.
Yeah, I mean that I think that's a worthwhile factor to consider. Mark Piscetti says this is just another stop on Sammy's journey to the world title, but this is more so a device to shoot Trick to the top of the card while giving him some seasoning. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. That's why I said this can work in parallel ways for both Sammy and Trick. That isn't a long-term feud. It's about both of them, but individually, and they just happen to be, aligning briefly before they split off in their own way. JC Scobie says Sammy winning U.S. title does nothing for him. He's beyond mid-card by now, in my opinion. I disagree with that. I mean, it depends on how broad your mid-card is. I mean, he's not a top guy, but I don't think he's not Roderick Strong, and Roderick's getting nice pops. He's a good mid-card guy. Some Wednesday night at Dynamite. In St. Paul in person, and it was like, oh, look, the crowd's kind of into him, but they're into him in a mid-card way. People are into Sammy, and we want him to complete his journey. That Montreal moment was huge. Cody had his moment. People, I think they relate to. They might be slightly annoyed by, but they find his angst endearing. They wish him well ultimately, and I don't think he'd be out of place in a world title match if they tell a good story arc.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I think Sammy is on his way. I mean, if I was going to pick somebody today as my leading candidate for Money in the Bank, I think it would be him.
There you go.
Unless they have bigger plans for somebody like Trick or somebody that they're really high on, I guess you could find another reason to go that direction. But I think Sammy is probably going to end up being a world champion at some point this year. If I was a betting man, it would probably be that period between SummerSlam and the build to WrestleMania when they're often more experimental about what they do at the top of the card.
Yeah. Yep. Derek Mitchell says, I thought the story was about winning a world title, but now the U.S. title has quelled Sammy's title desire. I don't know. I don't think that has to be the story they tell. I think Sammy can say, this is nice. It's got me on WrestleMania, but I still need to be world champion someday. I've been here, done this. I'm proud. I want to be defending champion, but I still have to find a way to the world title. I think in that much time, you can take away Derek's concern, and be just fine. Mark Biscotti adds, Sammy's in one of the main events next year. Slow burn, but I do agree this does nothing for him in the short run. That's a little premature. It might not, but I think it might. They might have a really good story in mind. I'm not down on it. I don't have a defeatist attitude that this is some pointless detour. I think it's a meaningful chapter in the story arc that they're telling with him. In fact, Mark Biscotti goes, Sammy, the heel Sammy is indeed a next step. His current face character is grating. Jake, how do you feel about that? Am I right that fans are tolerating him in sympathetic to his angst, or do you think it's more what Biscotti is saying, which is his character's grating, and it's like people are going to enjoy booing him because they're going to end up not wishing him well based on how he's handling his setbacks?
Well, I think Sammy's heel tendencies are to be a little grating. That's where he found the most success as a heel was being more or less a pest. And so is that necessarily the character that I'd like to see Sammy win the world championship with? Maybe not, but it might be the character he's most likely to win a world championship with in WWE. And so that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I'm in agreement with you that I think they build WrestleMania, in at least I think they try to have shows that are appealing in a holistic sense. They want to give you variety. They want to tell meaningful stories up and down the show. And, Sammy finding his way into a U.S. title match, if that is indeed where he ends up, doesn't necessarily mean that that's where he's going to be in 3 months at Money in the Bank or 6 months at SummerSlam. And so I think if it gets him to where he needs to be from a character perspective, I think it'll end up being just fine. I wouldn't worry about it in the slightest.
All right, good. Let's pause and introduce ourselves, and then we're going to talk Cody Randy. We'll talk some Jacob Fatu Drew and Jade and Rhea and more coming out of the show. Jelly Roll, of course, too. Got some chat comments on him and his role. So let's do that. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Friday, March 27th, 2026. I'm Wade Keller, host of the show, editor, publisher, and founder of the Pro Wrestling Torch Weekly newsletter and the website PWTorch.com, and the host of various podcasts, including the Wade Keller Post Shows covering Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown just about every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I am live on YouTube right after the shows go off the air with a variety of co-hosts, reviewing the show with live chat interaction, live callers, and emails. This Wednesday, I was at AEW Dynamite. I did join the show as an on-site correspondent while walking back to my car from the historic Roy Wilkins Auditorium in downtown St. Paul, Minnesota. And so thanks to Brian and Taylor for filling in for me as host and co-host while I was at the show. So if you miss that, you can see me walking the streets of St. Paul while doing giving an on-site perspective on things. The post shows I just talked about, you can watch them live on YouTube afterwards. You can also subscribe to the podcast feed for the post shows, and it's our red logo show. If you search Wade Keller in your podcast app, the red logo shows up. Subscribe to that. That includes content that's not on YouTube also, including flashbacks. And then while you're at it, you'll see a blue logo pop up. That's the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling podcast as opposed to the post show. That includes the weekly flagship episode, which a few days ago, featured Jason Powell from ProWrestling.net. He joins me almost all the time, every 3 weeks on the show, along with a rotation of other co-hosts. We talk about a broad array of topics, and this week it was a lot of WWE talk, but also some AW talk and other stuff that is free to subscribe to. That also includes our pay-per-view previews and media Q&As, interviews, and flashbacks going back 5, 10, and even 15 years. It's fun listening back for me, and I think a lot of listeners, to our flagship episodes from 15 years ago that week. So check that out. It's free. Search Wade Keller. Subscribe to both. While you're at it, search PWTorch to sign up for the PWTorch Daily Cast. Whole array of shows on that lineup. One of them that really stands out as different than anything else you'll find out there is the PWTorch 90s Past Cast with Alex McDonald and Patrick Moynihan. They review a Pro Wrestling Torch weekly newsletter from 30 years ago this week. They go page by page, article by article, line by line through my reporting, backstage tidbits, pay-per-view results, our take on those pay-per-views, columns, interviews, big name interviews in our Torch Talk series. Really fascinating show. If you want to learn about wrestling history and just hear two guys who love wrestling and have great chemistry with each other, that is one reason to subscribe for free to the PW Torch Daily Cast. Wanted to spotlight that show tonight, but there also are a variety of other shows, including the All Elite Conversation Club, the Wrestling Coast to Coast covering the indie scene, and more. So just search PW Torch in your podcast app and subscribe. And while you're at it, you'll see a charcoal gray logo pop up. That is the PW Torch VIP free sample feed. And we've got some free samples already. One from earlier this week, part one of the fix, I believe, is a free sample this week. So if you aren't familiar with the fix with Todd Martin and our format and our rapport and Todd's approach to analysis, you're going to want to check that out. That's free right now on the charcoal gray logo show, the PW Torch. Just search PW Torch to subscribe to that. You'll also notice there's locks on, little lock symbols on all the other shows that aren't free samples. You can unlock those using your Apple account, if using the native Apple Podcast app on your iPhone. So that is one way to get the VIP shows, including these shows with the ads and plugs, with the commercial breaks, I should say, removed from the feed. So it's just a streamlined listening experience with a VIP membership. And that is one way to do it. Another way is through Patreon, search PW Torch, and that also links up with Spotify. Or you can get a full VIP membership by going to pwtorch.com/govip. Give you full details on all the ways to sign up and all the cool benefits, including archives dating back almost 40 years now, including over 2 decades of podcasts on demand and our VIP podcast vault that's part of the iPhone and many Android and iOS app compatible podcast feed. All right, so enough on orienting you towards different things you should listen to or read or sign up for. Let's introduce tonight's co-host, Jake Barnett from the aforementioned ProWrestling.net. Is a ProWrestling.net week here with Jason Paul on the flagship and Jake co-hosting the Smackdown post show with me. Jake, always a pleasure to talk wrestling with you. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Yeah, always great to be here, Wade. Thanks for having me.
Just tell people briefly what you do, or take as long as you want. Tell people what you do. You're always pithy. What you do over at ProWrestling.net.
Yeah. So I do a weekly, transcript sort of live review of AEW Dynamite in a post-show podcast that members can listen to. I join Jason Powell every week for the .NET Weekly Show. We kind of go through news and some editorial content for the week, and then I also appear on any pay-per-view podcast reviews over there. So you can learn all about membership and getting access to those shows. It's at pwmembership.net.
pwmembership.net. What you do with Jason is kind of the .net flagship, so if you're looking for a similar format, but with Jason and Jake's analysis, which I highly recommend, a .net membership is a way to go. It's independent source of wrestling news, and I think they deserve your business, and you're familiar with their voices here. So go support them, pwmembership.net, if you haven't yet, and it fits your budget. I think you'll kick yourself for not having been listening to the .net weekly flagship over at ProWrestling.net once you sign up, and I think you'll stick around for it. Okay, let's get back to SmackDown analysis. We have 2 super chats. You can, by the way, join the conversation as always in the live chat if you're watching us live on YouTube. By the way, please subscribe to this channel, hit the subscribe button, and also like this episode. And ideally comment below. Show YouTube that you're engaged in the show, you care about what we're saying, and you want to interact with other viewers and listeners and the hosts. So that those are all ways to support us. You can also set a little alarm, click on that bell so that you get notified when we're about to go live. But not only are we on YouTube, but you can, if you can't watch us live on YouTube and you normally listen to us on the audio podcast side of things, then you can email the show as you're watching Raw, Dynamite, or SmackDown. And that email address is wadekellerpostshow@gmail.com. wadekellerpostshow@gmail.com. Send your questions or comments in, and we'll put it on the air. And then finally, you can join the show as a caller. You can leave your camera on or turn it off and be audio only. The link to be a caller on the show is in my TV report at PWTorch. So just go to the website, click on my report tonight on SmackDown. It changes every time. So you have to click on the TV report to get the new link for each show. Click on the link in my Dynamite, Raw, or SmackDown report to be a caller. Okay, so let's go to Super Chat, and I'll start with a big picture proclamation from Derek Mitchell. He says, I have to be honest, the build of this year's WrestleMania has been very underwhelming and disappointing. I can't wait for the Mania to come and go, and I'm looking forward to the remainder of the calendar year. Derek, thank you so much for the super chat. That's obviously, we welcome that. Jake, let's just get your big picture thoughts on where we are in the build of WrestleMania. That was this week's Pro Wrestling Torch Newsletter cover story. I looked at the likely lineup, matches we knew or had a hunch on, and really focused on the main two big men's matches in that, and assessed that it's a solid but not spectacular lineup and build at this point. I don't think it's an utter failure, and I think we should give them their full 3 weeks more to sell us on their plan and their execution. Where are you?
Yeah, I talked to the aforementioned Jason Powell about the WrestleMania build just yesterday, and he asked pretty much like rate 1 to 10 where I am on level of excitement, and I put myself at a 5, and so I guess you might call that underwhelming. I think it just hasn't quite reached me in the way that I had hoped. I think the two, I guess World Championship level men's programs both feel like they need a spark at this point. I don't think they've quite hit, a high gear. I'm still kind of confused about the direction of Cody and Randy, even after tonight's show. And I think, Punk and Roman might be slightly better, at least in thus far, in my opinion. But I'm also getting a little bit worried that they're just going to be, doing promos for the sake of getting under each other's skin rather than telling a coherent story. Because it's always, what's the insult of the week that's going to cause Roman or Punk to get fired up and throw a punch or a spear or whatever the case may be. And so
yeah.
I do think I would probably find myself agreeing. I don't know if I necessarily think, I'm willing to throw out Mania and just start looking forward to the rest of the year. I think they do have some time to right the ship, but it certainly hasn't been the strongest push for WrestleMania that we've seen in the last couple of years.
Well, what do you think about the comment earlier about Brock and Oba maybe being the most WrestleMania-esque match in terms of feeling special? I'm sure that's the case for some fans. I don't know that. I think there's people who are very much looking forward to Punk Roman. No question about it. I think Cody and Randy feels like there's a long history there, and there's going to be Cody fans and Orton fans who want to see it. I think Jade and Rhea are doing a really good job in a just clear-cut face-heel dynamic with their story. I think people are going to be into seeing Trick at his first WrestleMania. I think there's some boxes you check in terms of what makes this feel like WrestleMania. I think every one of those matches I just mentioned, in different ways to differing degrees, feels different than just a match you would see on a random Raw or SmackDown. So that's all positive. Yeah, Jake, any follow-up on kind of, I guess, in particular, Brock Oba and how you think that compares to the others?
Well, I think Brock and Oba has been really promising thus far. It seems like Brock is committed to doing his level best to get Obafemi over, and having him physically dominate him in their first two meetings is a good start. I think they've kept it short and sweet so far, to the point where it's like, well, they haven't really had a chance to screw it up. Like it's been so simple and straightforward that it's like, oh yeah, everybody can see what this is from the word go. It's just two big guys, squaring off for who's the most dominant guy in WWE right now in terms of physicality. And I think that's an easy story to convey. And so from a Brock and Oba standpoint, is it I think so far the easiest match to recommend? Yeah, I think that's probably true. But I think most of it is due to the fact that the other top matches, Cody and Randy and Punk and Roman, are thus far just kind of a narrative mess. It's just so crystal clear what Brock and Oba is, and the other matches are they're trying to paint they're getting too cute. It's like this shades of gray thing has taken over the top level of the company's booking, and I think it makes these matches a little bit squishier than they should be. I want to understand who I'm supposed to cheer and who I'm not, and I don't think they're doing a very good job of making that clear.
So if you had to choose between the part-time prick and the hypocritical old guy, who would you pick, Jake?
What a set of options to have in front of you, right?
That is what they've defined in the last month. It used to be CM Punk, one of the greatest superstars ever, using WWE parlance, and Roman Reigns, the head of the bloodline, the biggest star of the sports scene in this generation. And it's going to be a titanic battle between these two massive stars with their legacies on the line. Can Roman return to the top? He should be talking about what it will mean for him to win the title and have another long reign that'll make the other one pale in comparison. And you should have CM Punk saying, I am not done yet, and I'm going to show that I'm going to build this title up to be the most important, starting when I beat you, Roman Reigns. And it should be positive and big, and they should be battling over things that are going to make their careers bigger and excluding the other from reaching those heights themselves at their expense. And we're not getting that at all. I mean, this is not WrestleMania. This is a battle of two people who are pointing out a bunch of negatives about each other. And the phrase I use on the Raw post show is, it's compelling to watch, but I don't think it's compelling people to want to watch the match. So it's like compelling in and of itself in this ephemeral sugar rush in the moment. Oh my God, mic drop way. But when it's all over, you're like, but do I need to plan around watching that match? Do I need to figure out how ESPN Plus works? Do I need to get to Vegas and buy a ticket? I don't know that it's doing that. And I think those are two separate goals, and they should prioritize the second compelling part of it, compel people to watch and buy it, more than let's just make good TV where it's like, whoa, I can't believe they said that. And I think that's unfortunately the path they're going down. And I think they have a better option that I laid out there, which is, kind of build each other up and what their aspirations are, not tear the other down.
Yeah, I think that could work. If you have two guys who have as much history in terms of inside of the company, I think there's a larger philosophical debate that they could be having about what a victory for them would mean for the future of that championship or of the Raw brand or whatever the case may be. They're bringing the stakes down to essentially just the gutter, right? It's like, it's just who can take the lowest shot at the other guy.
Yep.
Getting under their skin in the most schoolyard insult kind of way possible.
Yep.
And I think I guess from my favorite WrestleMania main events are the ones that feel like they are asking the bigger question, or at least pitting two larger than life stars against one another. And I don't think they're achieving that in either of these matches. I mean, you could add Cody and Randy to that mix too. I think it's just a very it's an unfocused build at this point. It seems like more of a build to like a boxing pay-per-view or a UFC fight than the stories we're typically used to seeing at WrestleMania.
Yeah. Yep. Rude Dog says, this might be the first WrestleMania I'll be missing in a very, very long time. The whole ESPN thing sucks because my provider doesn't include the ESPN app, even though ESPN is paid for. That's a bad spot to be in. And it's not as common as getting it built in, but it does exist. And having to pay extra for it is a bummer. Rude Dog says, I already feel AW Dynasty has a better build than WrestleMania. That's worth pondering. Powder Repeat says, all matches should be clear face versus heel 90 to 95% of the time. Triple H is failing in this area. Let's use that to kind of parlay into Cody and Orton, which is obviously pertinent to the SmackDown post-show format here. So Randy cuts another promo, gets cheered, and they're not going for that. That's Randy beating up Cody the way he beat him up in that promo last week or 2 weeks ago, and what he said this week, and beating up Matt Cardona the way that he did brutally last week and this week. That is not a scheme that you lay out in the writer's room, hoping that Randy gets cheered. So let's just stipulate to that as reasonable people. Randy's not supposed to be being cheered right now, but they had to know that was likely. I mean, we've all talked about it. There's a headwind to getting people to boo Randy because they really like Randy Orton right now. He seems happier than he's ever seen lately. He's a legacy player. There's not a lot of people left from that era that can still go. People are kind of rooting for him to get over his issues and the voices in his head. It was a feel-good story. And now they're forcing a heel turn in a way that it's different than the John Cena thing, too, because people wanted Cena to turn forever. Randy's turned back and forth constantly. What fans wanted now is Randy just stay a good guy and retire a good guy because they think he's a good guy now and he's grown up and matured in front of their eyes. Their combating that has failed out of ineptness, because they had to know that they were battling fans. Their proclivity would be to cheer Randy. So how do we get them to boo him? Oh, beat up Cody. Well, I think people like Cody, but they're not going to get all worked up about it. We saw that tonight. So I think that is a problem, and I don't think that they solved it this week. And I also think Triple H gave in a little bit to the notion that he didn't buy into, but maybe was told was the case, which is, oh, the ardent fan base, they love Matt Cardona. They love Zack Ryder. He was under push. They want to push more. I don't think that's true. I think what Randy said was a babyface line last week when he insulted him, talked about action figures and called him a nerd and all that, an indie nerd and stuff. I think WWE fans largely see Matt that way. I don't think they're hostile towards him, but I don't think they're like, oh, Randy beat up Matt, so now I like Randy, but now I can't like Randy because he beat up Matt Cardona. So everything is sort of by the book and is fine in some alt universe fantasy land where people really like Matt Cardona. Cody is peaking as a babyface, and people were not buying Randy as a good guy, and they weren't happy for him, or they feel betrayed genuinely by him turning. None of that's true, and so to me, that is a problem, and it goes back to the comment about having actual faces and heels. This is not. If you're going to do the heel face construct, be good at it by casting wrestlers in the heel and face spot in alignment with having a connection and a familiarity with who your fan base are and what they want. And WWE right now, Jake, looks like they do not understand their fan base because they've chosen the heel face construct, which I'm definitely not against. I think that's very valid. You can do other ones. That's not what WWE does as a rule. And if you do it, you have to be good at casting people in the right spot. And Randy was not ready to be booed. And they had to have a better plan than what they've done. Right? I mean, I think you're nodding along. Is there anything I've said where you're like, well, I take exception to that framing?
No, I think I'm nodding along. If you were going to construct a heel turn for Randy Orton, you wouldn't have started it with Cody basically giving him permission to do it.
And having Randy underline it.
And then having Randy point that out.
Yes.
And then having him beat up a mid-card guy that hasn't really gotten much of a reaction since he returned. And oh, by the way, RKO, a divisive country music star that got a bunch of cheers from the crowd. You know, like I don't think they understand who their fans are at this point or why they react the way that they do. And I think it shows in the booking of both the Punk and Roman thing and what they're doing with Randy and Cody. I think they have an idea in the writer's room of who they're writing for, and it's not the people that are showing up to their wrestling program in person. You know, it's they're writing for somebody else, and that person is not in touch with what the fans want.
Yeah. Yep. Well put. But Pun LB19 says the only way to get Randy healed is if the person on the phone with him is the final boss. So Matt Cardona, by the way, I think made fans angry because he could have waited to come out until after Randy revealed who the person on the phone was. I don't like when they do that, where the baby face cuts off a heel, especially in that situation, from revealing something the fans want to know because they just are itching to get out there and interrupt the segment. It's a trope formatically that I don't like. And I think it makes, if I'm a babyface and they want me to do that, I'd be like, can I not be the person who stops a wrestler from revealing something fans really want to know? That said, that's what they did. We don't know who it is. Two things: who do you think it is, or who are the candidates, and is it a good story? I guess in that context, and then also, what about specifically The Rock as an option, the final boss?
I mean, if you're going to have The Rock at WrestleMania, I feel like you would have started making that appearance well known when you. I mean, I guess maybe it's a scramble to get ticket sales. I guess you could make the argument that was the case, but I would have thought they would have been advertising The Rock for Mania weeks ago, because you know the longer you wait, the more difficult it is to push those final tickets out the door. People have to make travel plans and everything else. And so I guess the leading candidate in my head is Cowboy Bob Orton. Like they're going to be in St. Louis next week. I think that's where the Ortons are most well known, and so that makes sense to me. The other option that I kind of threw out on a lark, and it's kind of a long shot, is that he's not talking to anybody, and he's having some sort of mental breakdown where he's talking to the voices in his head on a telephone. Which I mean, it's not really. I mean, it's probably not going to be that, but it would be more interesting than having it be Bob Orton probably. But it could be anybody from his past that could show up and get a big reaction. But I think it's clearly somebody that he trusts, and with Orton, that's a very short list of people, and so I think his dad is probably the most likely candidate.
Swole in the chat says Ric Flair, Batista, or Kevin Owens. Powder Peach just adds about the KO thing. KO would be great, but it would also confuse the situation further because he'll get a big pop. I agree. I think that's sort of disqualifying. But in terms of, it shouldn't be him. But Flair or Batista, I don't know if Batista wants to return for this. I don't know if that's how he'd want to be reintroduced. But Ric Flair would make some sense, storyline-wise.
Yeah.
Yep. So I could see that. But I like what you said about St. Louis and his dad. That makes more sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of aligns with where they're going to be, but I don't, I can't discount, that it being The Rock if they think that, he has availability. And, but I think that further, confuses the situation, because it's like, well, then it becomes less about Randy and Cody's personal animosity, and now it becomes about some long running grudge that The Rock has with Cody Rhodes. And it kind of makes Randy feel like a third player in that situation. So I don't know. I think there's there's probably good and bad about all these choices, but if you want to keep it the most personal, the fact that Orton was talking about wrestling having more than one royal family led me to believe that he was talking to somebody who was close to him, like family. So that's what makes me think it's his dad.
Yep. Compelling case there. Goodfellas says, I think Cardona's earning his stripes back. He'll catch on eventually, is my guess. Him appearing at Mania for a cameo in the main event would help a lot. I don't agree with any of that, but I've never been a believer in Zack Ryder. I think he's just kind of I don't know. I mean, I don't have anything nice to say about him. But I also don't have anything mean to say, as long as you're not trying to make a case he should be a main eventer. But once you start saying he should be like in the top, above just kind of a mid-card novelty, affable guy, once you make that argument, then mean things start coming up, like Claude and Doofus. And I don't want to think that about him, because I think he's nice. He's nice, but he's not like a top guy, and I don't think he'll catch on eventually. And I don't want him doing a cameo in the main event. I want the main event to be straight up. So, Goodfella, I'm not sold on what you're saying. Jake, am I being too harsh, or is that kind of roughly where you are on the former Zack Ryder?
I've always sort of identified him as, on this biggest stage, just given that he's never really found a personality that didn't feel really forced. He kind of feels like he tops out as a mid-card guy, and that's always where I've seen him. And so could he eventually get to the point where he's winning the United States Championship? I think that's a reasonable place to see as his ceiling. But I do not think he's destined to be a main eventer in WWE unless something totally unforeseen happens and he manages to get over in a way that completely surprises me. You can't completely rule that out, but it doesn't seem likely, just given his history and the character that he's been playing on TV since he got back, which is almost amorphous. Like, I have no idea who Zack Ryder is in WWE.
He's playing a guy that you should know who he is, even though it's such a small sliver of people who have followed him. And I don't know, people who live in a bubble think everybody knows who he is because he's been in, I don't know. All right. Derek Hubbard says, if they want Orton to be booed, they need to have Randy cower from Cody, tuck tail and run, make Cody the obvious aggressor. I thought they were doing that when Randy got one shot in on Cody and then rolled under the ropes and Cody went back after him. But when you have Randy breaking through security to get at Cody, I mean, it like, these are just two guys who want to fight each other. And man, I'm not going to sit here and say I have the magic formula for Randy being a heel, because it's not my job to come up with that very specific plan. And if you get too specific, it can, kind of go down the vibe of fantasy booking. Like, well, if I had the book, I'd do this and it'd be better. And I don't do that much. I will just say, in general, what they're doing and the reaction they're getting, it should have been foreseeable that it is not helping Randy get booed. And even worse, it's not helping Cody get cheered. And Cody deserves to have a well-booked heel opponent who, and I'm not saying Randy's sabotaging Cody. I mean, I think, I'm not casting blame beyond really Paul Levesque. It's his job. The buck stops with him in terms of what's going on here. But everybody should have seen that this is not, and maybe they just don't care. Maybe they don't want that. But I don't buy that, because when you look at what they had Randy do to Cody and to Cardona and how the announcers framed it, I think they just thought this is a heel, and it's not. But tonight they could have corrected course, and I thought they would make an effort to do so. I don't think Cody was bad tonight. We should talk about him for a minute. I think he was fine. Walk into the ring, being determined and all that. We didn't hear from him yet. They had a by the numbers, structurally solid pull apart brawl. It felt like they had maybe 2 more minutes of TV time than they anticipated. It sure went on a long time. But to have the punchline, I don't know if punchline's right, where the climax be, oh no, poor Jelly Roll got RKO'd. now you're shifting the focus from Cody wants revenge against Randy for what Randy did to him. And as Derek points out, I think astutely, Randy should seem like he wants no piece of Cody. If you're going for boost. Now, I think they're thinking, well, that's not Randy's character. He voices his head. He's going to be the relentless, vicious, remorseless Randy, and he can't cower. That would go against the whole storyline. But if the goal is going to be to get him booed, Jake, you work backwards from him being a coward. You work backwards from him. You go, all right, on this date, Randy's going to avoid a fight with Cody. Now let's talk about what we're going to do the 2-3 weeks before it so it makes sense that he does that and have the promos be built around the notion that Randy is willing to go after, he's willing to do anything to get number 15, but he's not doing so in a way that's honorable or admirable or worthy of cheers. And I don't think that discussion happened behind the scenes in the writer's room or with Randy and Cody and the brain trust there. I think they're just kind of winging it in a way that shows a disconnect with their own audience and an obliviousness to the formula that would actually get the heel booed.
Yeah, they need to get Randy into a situation where he's either explaining why he extrapolated what Cody said to the point where he thought, well, yeah, I was given permission to, because clearly what Cody was saying was like, hey, I want the best version of you in the ring at WrestleMania. I didn't want the psycho that punts people and hits people with chairs while they're trapped in the stairs. And so I think we need to hear from Cody, and then we need to have Randy justify himself in the most heel and hateful way possible. Like he has to be jealous of Cody Rhodes. Like I think that's the key. Like I was here for that entire time that you left this company to go do your own thing. And now you've come back and you've usurped me. You've won world championships. You've been the star that I should have been for all, and that's a story that I think people can relate to and begin to, see the jealousy and the hatred and begin to boo Randy. I don't think what they're doing now is effective because they're essentially trying to have their cake and eat it too, where Randy gets to be the crazed lunatic and he gets to be cheered for it because he's attacking people that the fans are also, kind of milquetoast on. And so they have to make it personal. They have to make it hateful. And that's the key to trying to turn this thing around. I think they've kind of painted themselves into a corner now where, they have to go in that direction because they really don't have enough time to pivot to an entirely different story in 3 weeks. They have to make it a continuation of what we've already seen.
Yeah. I think tapping into or expanding on something you said in terms of jealousy over Cody, you could even have Randy kind of harken back to jealousy over Cena. There was a time when Randy can say this is going to be my company. And I've won a lot of world titles, but there's, the conversation was always about somebody else. It was Rock when I showed up, and then it was going to be, and then Brock went away, and then he came back. It's all about Brock and it's Undertaker. Like you could pull some things from Randy where you like go, yeah, Randy has always not been the bridesmaid in the way that Drew McIntyre was, but he's always like that second or third guy. It wasn't the centerpiece. And you don't want it to get meta where he goes, I should have been pushed instead of you, but have this sort of irrational jealousy pent up that like it's all about Cena's title reign and how many reigns he had. And here I am with more than almost anybody else in history. Nobody's talking about me. And then you show up after your journey and it's all Cody. Marsha. And have Randy show a side where you're like, I thought he was more cool than that. That's all going on in his head. He's had a good career and he's a whiner and this sort of feels irrational. And, and then of course you need the support around it. The announcers need to say, Randy needs to understand he could have been that centerpiece if he won the big matches, but he lost the big matches. He won a lot of titles, but he didn't hold them long enough to be Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes, John Cena. He's not in that conversation for a reason. The announcers need to back that up and say, and the narrative, even with Cody too, should be, Randy, there's a reason that you're unraveling. It's because you've always come up, and you don't want it to sound too much like Sami Zayn, but find a way to differentiate it. But you've made it to the top, but you were your own worst enemy in terms of staying there. And now you're going to blame me? Like, I just think there's material here. And it's why when we looked at this possibility, I said, I think it'd be easier to do Cody as a heel and Randy as a face in terms of where the fan sentiment was. I think the fans would find, it's fun to boo Cody. It's new and novel. And we like Randy. I don't want to boo him. That'd have been a path of less resistance. But I thought there was a way to make this path with resistance, with the headwind of Randy, work. But they have not done the things that I thought would make it work.
No,
yeah.
they've been kind of driving the cart in circles, right? Like we haven't, as much as Randy has, beat up people and attacked Cody, we've learned nothing about why he's chosen to do any of that. Like it's just been very much, I saw an opportunity and I took it. And I don't know if that's something that resonates with the people in the creative room, where it's like a cutthroat environment, and so they identify with somebody just grabbing an opportunity by the throat and strangling it. But I don't think that's something that resonates with people who want, who are trying to live a decent life, right? Like that's not it's not relatable, and I don't think the way that Cody responded tonight was particularly relatable either, in the sense that we're supposed to buy into the idea that Matt Cardona is his friend, and Randy, I guess, quote unquote, broke his arm the previous week and then beat the absolute crap out of him tonight, in that match. And then Cody, slowly gets off of his bus and takes 2 eternities to walk to the ring, and then doesn't really even check on his friend before getting in the ring and getting into a brawl with Randy. It's like, what am I supposed to take away from that? Where Cody is this virtuous figure? Like there was nothing there either. And so it's like neither guy is being portrayed in a way that I can identify with and say, oh yeah, that might have been what I did in that situation. So I think it's a tough sled from here on out, where they have a couple of weeks to try and make both of these guys seem like they're more relatable to the audience and to deepen the personal nature of their story. And it's a lot of work for 3 weeks. Like it's going to take, several segments on every show to try to kind of turn this thing around.
And then there's the question, do they even care? Do they know that what's happening is a problem? I mean, I don't know that you would book this way if you were cognizant of this being a bad, the result of their booking being a bad thing, because it's so foreseeable what's happening. They must not care. And I think that's maybe a symptomatic of an even larger problem. JC Scooby in the chat says Triple H's booking sucks. What have you thought of Jelly Roll in this? I kind of, said Jelly Roll was the climax of this. He got RKO'd. That is not a heel move that I think WWE thinks it is, with a big part of the audience. So yeah, I mean, but I'm kind of positive, because I think Jelly Roll's good in most of what he's doing. I just question him he's being booked as a more beloved figure than he is, but he's playing the part of a universally beloved legendary figure who fans are just happy to see around, like very early Pat McAfee, like the super enthusiastic guy who loves WWE and the fans identify with him. There was some aspect to Pat McAfee early on that had that. Jelly Roll has some of that also, but I mean, and we'll get into Kit Wilson in a second, but in terms of being like whispering advice, words of wisdom to Randy last week, words of wisdom and encouragement to Cody this week, and then coming to the ring to be the guy standing in between them, it feels like a little above his level to use him this much. Jake.
Yeah, I guess to me, Jelly Roll is a guy who's probably on the back end of his 15 minutes of fame. Like I guess, I don't see him as this, pop culture figure that's universally beloved, and that people, just, they see him and he's just instantly recognizable in a way that it's, it's like they think he's Willie Nelson or something, where
yeah, there you go. Yep.
Where it's like, oh, this sage is backstage to offer, worldly advice to these athletes and hold their friendships together. And I don't think Jelly Roll is qualified for that role in that sense. I don't think he's quite earned that level of, just universal, recognition. So I don't hate him. Like, I think, like you said, most of what he's been doing on TV has been fine. Like he hasn't stuck out to me in a bad way in terms of his acting performances or anything like that. But I think he's just trying to fill a role that's bigger than him at this point, and it's kind of distracting from. I don't know why I'm supposed to care about Jelly Roll stepping in between a friendship that's decades longer than his role. His role in pop culture. Like he's not like the linchpin of Cody and Randy's friendship, and I think that's what they want you to believe here.
Yeah. Yep. So there's a little pushback, and I get it, to kind of our characterization of a way to get Randy booed. And keep in mind, we're not a committee of people spending our full-time job figuring out, as part of our job, how to make this work. But for illustrative purposes, we're saying, and Derek suggested it, Randy should not be super brave, hitting all his moves that people pop for, and beating up Matt Cardona and Jelly Roll, who are less than sympathetic figures. There should be something about him that makes fans think he's less cool. That's the way. I mean, basically, that should be the starting point in a booking meeting. When, we're going to turn Randy heel, everyone in the room should go, we're not. How fans are going to boo him? And then Paul Levesque goes, well, let's figure out a way to give us a chance where that happens. How do we make that happen? Let's make fans look at him differently, at least during this chapter. How do we do that believably? A pushback to what we said is Tommy McLaughlin. He goes, Randy's character's not a whiny bitch. Excuse my language. And that's true. You know, Zach Barber goes, when has Randy ever been whiny? Crazy, unpredictable, dark, yes, never whiny. And that's the challenge with turning him. Zach Barber goes, too often on my soaps, I see characters' long-standing traits adjusted to support a particular plot. That feels like what you guys are suggesting. And I think that's a fair reaction to what we're saying. I think what we're saying is, illustratively, if you're going to turn Randy heel, you must be cognizant of fans' proclivity to cheer him. What can be done if you're going to try to get this match, the dynamic in this match, working?
I would push back on that characterization of what I'm saying a little bit. I don't think Randy needs to become a squish who runs away from Cody Rhodes. I think he needs to become bitter, jealous, and hateful. And I think those are characteristics that he has embodied at different parts of his career. And I don't think he needs to run away from Cody in order to accomplish that. He can attack him. He can blindside him backstage. He can beat him up on his bus. He can, they've done a lot of that same stuff with Drew McIntyre over the last couple of months, if I'm being completely honest. But I think the impetus for Randy's character change has to be something along the lines of, I've been loyal to this place and I'm not as celebrated as you. And you left for 6 years and then they rolled out the red carpet for you and you've been the face of this company while I've been sitting on the sidelines. And that's a part of Randy that I think, would be instantly recognizable to people who have been following him for 20 years, because it's something that he embodied during that Cena era. And so going back to the old Randy necessarily means him becoming a version of himself that was the foil to John Cena for a decade. I think that's just what it would become.
Yeah. It's a good defense. Yep. So take that, chat. All right. JC Scooby says WWE has made Cody boring and stale. I felt a little bad for Cody when he's out there, because the shadow of Dusty is always looming over Cody. I mean, there's, what's the term? Imposter syndrome. Like, Cody's like, I'm doing what my dad did, but I'm not getting the reaction that he got. And that's kind of rough. I mean, Cody has had a great career, and his peak is in some ways higher than Dusty's peak, although it's so hard comparing a territory system boom period to an international WWE juggernaut and being at the top. Cody's had a really good career, but he does not have the same type of charisma that his dad had. And I think he's been on a long running quest, other than Stardust and, here's how to trim your nose hairs, that period of looking in the mirror and grooming himself. He's been on a quest to figure out how to kind of get out of his dad's shadow or be something in that category, but also in his own lane. But when he was fighting back against Randy, it's not Cody's fault. And that's kind of what, I'm disappointed in with the Randy, what they've done since the Randy turn and how they turned him, is Cody kind of deserved, with that spirited pull apart brawl, to have fans going crazy like they would have for the Von Erichs, beating up Michael Hayes and Buddy Rogers, Terry Gordy, or Ric Flair, or the Rock and Roll Express, in at the peak of their popularity in the 80s, where you just had that old school crowd reaction just going bonkers. And there's plenty of other examples out there. Vern Gagne had that kind of crowd reaction when Bobby Heenan and Bachman would cheat on him or whatever. That's what Cody wants. He grew up with that. He's a student of the business. And Cody wasn't getting that tonight in Pittsburgh. And that's because they've matched him against Randy. And so I did feel a little for Cody doing everything right in what he was asked to do in a structure that in the past, Jake, would have led to the crowd going crazy. And they didn't go crazy for the spots they were supposed to. There were more Randy chants and Cody chants, I think. None that were super strong either way. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess I feel a little for Cody in this because I don't think what's going on, he hasn't had a chance to make a big mistake in this yet. I think it's the booking and to a degree Randy with whatever agency he has, and just the choice of Randy as his opponent. Although Cody has flex and power behind the scenes that kind of led to this. Jake, what's your view on Cody's position in all this?
Well, I don't think he's like in a terrible place. He's not getting booed, right? Like that would be
That's the thing. Yeah. Yep.
Like he's still getting, maybe not as solidly or strongly positive reactions as he was getting a year ago. But people still react to his music. They still pop when he walks out. His promos probably have gotten a little stale. I mean, he's typically talking about the same 4 or 5 things over and over again. But I think he is in a uniquely difficult position with Randy, who just has this legacy of greatness in WWE that lends to him being cheered. He's a legacy act. He's a legend. He's more than earned the position that he's in, which is why I think they need to go even more over the top with what they're doing with Randy, because you need to try to find a way to get both of these guys involved in this to where they're getting the reaction that you want. And I think, they've allowed Randy to play, into the cheers almost. Maybe they backed into that. Maybe it's just a lack of awareness, or maybe, they were thinking that they would get some type of reaction for the Cardona stuff and the Jelly Roll stuff that they didn't get. But now that they've seen the reaction to this, and they realize that even if they had the best intentions, they failed to anticipate the reality of the situation. Now they have to pivot. And so I think next week is going to be probably the most crucial one. They're going to be in St. Louis. Randy Orton is likely going to be the most likely to get the biggest cheers of this entire run heading into WrestleMania on that show. Yeah. So can they find a way to make that crowd boo him? And I think it's going to be an inordinately difficult challenge for them. So they have to, put their thinking caps on and figure something out.
Off air, before they go live, Randy should burn a St. Louis Cardinals jersey and trash the team. Say he's glad that the Rams aren't in St. Louis anymore, and he's glad the Blues aren't making the playoffs, and just do some cheap heat stuff. If they want to get him booed, I think the fans would laugh and go, okay, you don't even follow sports, Randy. We don't think you follow any of that stuff. You're just told to say that. We're going to cheer you to spite the writers who made you do that. I mean, honestly, that's the headwind that they have, and St. Louis, the timing of being in St. Louis is not great. Yeah. Going back to Jelly Roll for a second, chat has something to say about him. Zach Barber says, I find Jelly Roll offensive to both wrestling and country music. I don't know enough about country music or Jelly Roll's country music to be offended by it. And I don't find him offensive to wrestling. I just find him overused by 40%, or whatever, give or take. Derek Mitchell in a super chat says, Jelly Roll lost weight. Kudos to him. But his 12-step shaman act is tiresome. He's channeling his inner Rodney King. Why can't we all get along gimmick? There's kind of an aw shucks, if we're just all reasonable, we can all be happy together type vibe to him. Goodfella says, Jelly Roll is game, but very slow, and his green shows, in my opinion. Oh, for sure, his green shows. JC Scooby says, Jelly Roll brings nothing but MAGA clown. I don't think he's hardcore MAGA, but he hasn't taken a stand against, all the obvious things you should. Powder Repeats says, celebrity fantasy camp, like Wade says. It's another one here. We'll go ahead and respond to that. We'll look for another chat comment. Just your thoughts on Jelly Roll's execution tonight, actually against Kit Wilson in particular. We should talk about that. I'll frame it. I don't have a problem with him beating Kit Wilson.
No, Kit Wilson I would expect anybody they put up against Kit Wilson to win at this point. But kudos to Kit Wilson for, he's very good at his job. Like he did everything he could to make Jelly Roll look good in that match. And it was far more passable than I would have expected, just coming into the show. So I think, Kit deserves to take a bow for that. But just in terms of Jelly Roll and the 12-step stuff, I think that's, it's not what his public persona has been up until recently. And so it feels like it's put upon purposely to tell this story. And then the whole Kumbaya thing where he's trying to play peacemaker between Randy and Cody. Like I think Jelly Roll appeared on WWE television a handful of times and had a tag match with Orton at one point, and now we're supposed to believe that they've been bros for 20 years, and Jelly Roll's a guy that he confides in his in his free time and stuff. It's hard to buy. I think they just it's a miscalculation on their part to expect people to bite on this stuff when it feels so hastily thrown together, and so I think that's really my issue with it, is like they're asking you to suspend your disbelief in a way that's nearly impossible.
Yeah, well put. Kit losing, by the way, to Jelly Roll. You could say, well, a trained wrestler lost to a country music star who's never wrestled singles match. That's bad. I think Kit Wilson losing to Jelly Roll, at the level on the card he's at, it's not going to doesn't take anything away that they want to do with him in the immediate, and fans can forget that or not care about it if he ever turns babyface. Also, he got cursed. Mm-hmm. Losing to Jelly Roll could be a result of getting cursed, and you just look at it that way too. Some negative. Tommy McLaughlin says, "I'm not sold or invested in Jelly Roll at all." Chris Rucker says, "I'm so effing sick of Jelly Roll on TV. Like, why is he here? And he's annoying as hell with this fake good guy shit. Beat it, guy." I think WWE should be cognizant of that. Factor in that he's not for everybody, and if you treat him like a celebrity who's bigger than he is, for whatever the motivations are for doing that, it's the best you can get, or you're just in a bubble where you think he's bigger than he really is. That is, there's danger in that. Zach Barber says, "Wade, his music is trash. That's all you need to know." I guess I'll take your word for it. Back to turning Randy real quick. Real Legend says, "Randy could kick a puppy these days and still get cheered." I hope not, but I don't want them to. Don't test that. That would not be something I'd want you to test at all.
Yeah, do the Snitsky bit with the stuffed puppy or something if you want to go that far.
Yeah. Okay, some comments about Cody in the chat. Going back to what Cody's up to. First of all, Goodfella says, "I've liked Cody's run," and I have too. Yep, I mean that's that. I don't disagree with that. Tommy McLaughlin goes, "It's almost like Cody's trying to manufacture charisma, if that makes sense." I think there's something to that, Jake. There is something that's calculated about Cody. It can be a feature and a flaw depending on the context. I mean, he is very, meticulous in his presentation. There's another word I've used for him. Maybe it'll come to me. Fastidious. That's better. That's the word. He's very fastidious in his in the way he presents himself, in a way that would seem to be off-putting to the average pro wrestling fan. But he's the son of Dusty, and he's established his credentials with fans through his journey, through being, pushed poorly by Vince McMahon, who didn't believe in him, proven himself outside of WWE in New Japan, ROH, and of course AEW most prominently, and had that whole checklist that showed he was connected to the ardent fan. And then he came back and he worked that Seth match with that gruesome looking injury. There's so, and he was a guy who wanted to bring back the vintage IC title belt. He's like, I care about the old belts. Like, there's so many things about him that fans relate to, and they see his journey as they vicariously live through his journey. So the fact that he does try to manufacture charisma, which I think is undeniably true, not that he doesn't have it, but he does. There's something sort of planned and mechanical sometimes about what he does. I don't think fans hold it against him like they would almost anybody else because of all those positives that I just mentioned.
Yeah, I think, the return to WWE and obviously working through that gruesome injury, it was a more concrete demonstration of just how committed he is to his career. Like, in AEW, he tried to show how committed he was, but it came across in the wrong way. Like, he was setting himself on fire, and he was banning himself from holding world championships, and just all kinds of stuff where you're just like, I think it's like the level of try hard here is just off the charts, where it came across as just totally forced. And there was a period there where when he came back to WWE where it seemed like the pieces fell into place for him to demonstrate his commitment and and everything in a way that just came across as more genuine for a time period. And now that the steam is kind of coming to an end, like for this initial run, and it seems like he's just kind of run out of original ideas for his character, or run out of interesting feuds as a babyface. I think the cracks start to show, where it's like it's very clear that he is trying very hard all the time, to maintain a very specific image for himself. This guy's got family photos of himself at the beach, and he's wearing the same three-piece suit you see him wearing on SmackDown. It's just like the bit is outrageous, and so I think people are they get to the point where it's like, okay, I've had just enough of that for now, and let's try something else. And then maybe they'll come back to Cody. Maybe a heel turn would revitalize him. I don't know, but I think you are kind of hitting that point with Cody where it's like it's too much of the same thing all at once, and he just refuses to adapt and change. He's been I think one of the reasons he ended up going back to WWE is because he wanted to give it another go as a babyface, despite probably everybody and his brother telling him that he could benefit from a heel turn. So
yeah,
I think Cody is just that guy. Like and love him or hate him, he's going to be trying his hardest all the time, and that can be exhausting at points. And I think we're getting to that now.
It could be exhausting for Cody himself if you're kind of feel empathy for somebody who's trying really try hard, but like he wants this to work, but he can try too hard to the point that it's counterproductive. It doesn't feel natural.
I guess he just juxtapose him to Trick Williams, who is just everything he does is just effortlessly cool. Like it doesn't even appear that he's trying. It's just it just exudes from his pores. And Cody is like the opposite of that. It's like there's like 1,000 tiny Codys pedaling on bikes inside of him all the time to try and maintain this image. And it's the exact opposite of what you see with guys who are just more naturally charismatic. And so, there are periods where Cody has been the most over guy in the company. But I think, that wanes and waxes with time as people, they grow accustomed to something and then they move on to the next new hot thing. And, I think he struggles because, despite how hard he's pedaling, he can't quite match what, say, somebody like a Trick is doing, because it comes across as that much more like, oh yeah, that's what we're looking for, and so it is what it is. But I think a heel turn would be magical for Cody at some point, but I just don't know if we're going to get it.
How do you expect me to go on after you've created the image of 1,000 little Codys pedaling inside Big Cody?
Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah. The chat's chiming in here. Powder Repeat says Cody is definitely calculated. And he's the one who says he's a Cody fan. Here it is. I love Cody because I'm a sucker for good old baby faces, but he also is acknowledging, he's definitely calculated. Powder Repeat adds, Cody thinks and probably overthinks everything that's going to be on TV. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. Zach Barber says calculated is the exact word. For years, Cody has felt like he workshops everything he plans to say or do through a team and some focus groups. Derek Mitchell says, I've been a fan of Cody about all of his heated feuds, whether it's been Seth, Brock, KO, Drew, or Randy. I'll feel the same with some of the same beats. Turn on him, bloody him, pull aparts. Yeah, I mean,
don't forget Dusty. They all bring up Dusty too. Yeah, that's required.
Yep. That was starting to turn into something that felt like you're using your dad instead of paying tribute to him, and you need to pull away from that. Zach Barber says Dustin has always come across as an authentic human being outside of Goldust, obviously. Yeah, Dustin has ups and downs in terms of the sides of himself that we see. There are times he feels little too apt to be defensive and jump in on social media and I don't know, other things. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. Goodfella says, I don't hate on preparation. I appreciate it actually, but I always don't connect with it. You got to find that authenticity. Yeah. I mean, preparation's good, but you don't want to seem, like you're, like you are just a house of cards of preparation. And if you just, flick your finger on it, that preparation falls apart and there's nothing behind it. but preparation when you're your natural self is a good combination. Goodfella says, as far as Trick goes, Trick Williams is young and optimistic. Cody has lived in the world for 20 more years. It affects you. Yeah. Chris Ruckers.
But go back to Cody, I guess not quite 20 years ago, but like the young and idealistic Cody didn't have the charisma Trick had either.
No,
it's
for sure.
It's not transferable in that way.
Chris Rucker says Jake is nailing it with Cody. Yep. Especially the 1,000 little Codys. Let's see. I'm not going to read that. Tommy McLaughlin says the stigma of being Dusty's son is always there. And Hockey B, welcome to the chat, says Cody has never had charisma. I don't think that's an outlandish statement, depending on how you define charisma. If you say at the level of Trick, just like you said, Jake, it just flows naturally, or rock or whatever. Yeah, but there is a version of Cody that he has tapped into that has worked in terms of fans identifying with him in his journey and seeing that he takes his job seriously in a way that is admirable, even if it's a little, fastidious and overly formal and calculated. I think people were forgiving of that because there is a earnestness to his charisma that worked in the moment that he peaked. And now the question is, can they go from there? Let's shift to Drew McIntyre and Jacob Fatu. They announced, Nick Aldis announced that there's going to be an unsanctioned match, which did not get a pop. No rules, no countouts, no time limit. Just the ref is only there not to enforce any rule because there are none, just to count a pin or acknowledge a submission. I thought, it'd be ideal if you go an unsanctioned match and the crowd went bonkers. I don't know if it's just Pittsburgh was a little bit weird in that way, other than, being really into like Trick and sort of Randy. I don't know if they in Rhea. I don't know, they're into some stuff, but nevertheless, it's not a big deal. That point. I thought Jacob Fatu standing in the ring, cutting his promo, minus the over-reliance on catchphrases. I looked at him and I was like, how different would WrestleMania be right now if the politics and the reasons, and I think there's some legit reasons not to have pushed Jacob to a top world title spot. But what if they had? What if it was Jacob Fatu in whatever world we're in, challenging CM Punk for the title as a heel, challenging heel Drew McIntyre to a title as a babyface, going after Cody as a heel, or as a babyface going after a heel Cody. There's all kinds of options that had they planned for this at least for probably 6, 8, 9 months ago. They could be there right now, and that'd be fresh. And I think there is a real desire to see that next wave come up. It's that question of when do you disassemble a team that was on the cusp of great, but didn't quite get there. And now the stars are aging out. Your salary cap is bloated, and you have some young stars who deserve more time on the field, ice, whatever. When do you say goodbye to the veterans and go, okay, let's take a step back to build for another crescendo? And WWE might be at that point, Jake, and the reaction to the build and the sort of flailing, I wouldn't say desperately, but just flailing without everything just sort of clicking, might be a sign that should be kind of the end of the Roman, Punk, Randy, Drew, Cody, Seth-centric era where they're all facing each other sort of incestuously, and instead stop rationalizing, well, that guy hasn't earned it and these people they have to be in main events. I've written about that in the Wade Keller News Bulletin on the VIP side of things, that WWE's in a mode where there is sort of a seniority rationale for who deserves a spot at WrestleMania, and we can only trust them. They're over. They've proven themselves. There's all kinds of good reasons, but sometimes you just got to go with Stone Cold. You know what I mean? Sometimes you just got to go with the person who is like, what? I didn't expect this, but we better go with it. Jake, what do you think about that with Trick and Oba and Javon and Heck Dom? Even Rhea, I'd still put in that category, even though she's established. On and on. What do you think?
No, I think you're absolutely on point. I don't know if this is going to be, the final hurrah for Roman and Punk and Seth, having major spots at WrestleMania, but they should certainly be meeting new opponents. The Braun Breakers, the Oba Femis, the Trick Williams, the Carmelo Hayes, the Ilya Dragunovs, the Gunthers of the world. They should be moving up. They should be facing higher profile opponents. They should be getting bigger opportunities. We should be seeing a new crop of people becoming world champions, or at least world championship contenders. And I put Jacob Fatu in that mix. And I think they should be doing better by people like Drew McIntyre too, who has been one of their standout performers for the last couple of years, but he's always been a bridesmaid to other higher profile acts who continue to take precedent over him when it comes to major opportunities at SummerSlam and WrestleMania and winning Royal Rumbles and things of that nature. I think they hit a peak, with the Bloodline story a couple of years ago, and they're now off that peak. And I think they have to start trying to find the next big thing. And that should start, if it's not going to happen at Mania this year, then it should start shortly thereafter.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not like condemning their decision to stick with this crew through this year. Because I think they could have booked better, either made better match choices or better decisions on how to frame and build the matches up than they have to make it work. But when you take into account some shortcomings on the decisions, or they would say unexpected or unmanageable crowd responses, I would say it was foreseeable and manageable. I think they could have made this work. But it does feel like now is the time to go, okay, here's all these top people who have main evented. Now let's be sure we're doing what we're doing with Brock and Oba this year. Match them against future stars. And maybe Braun Breaker and Seth both get healthy enough to do it, and it's Braun as a younger guy taking on Seth, and we get another match like that. Sammy and Trick could feel that way. It's not like we're missing that, but I mean, Roman, Roman's feuds are precious, but let's not have this Roman verse where it's just the people he finds politically palatable and comfortable working. Let's get him out of his comfort zone a little bit. Let's freshen him up. Same with CM Punk, who I don't think is unwilling to do that. That was his mission in AEW. I want to put young guys over. That's what he said from the beginning, almost to the detriment of AEW. He just wanted to wrestle young guys and not the top guys. So the options are there, but it's like, let's get in that mode where let's take these top guys and start matching them against the next generation. It's not about age. It's about how long you've been on top. Jacob Fatu's not young. Gunther's not young. LA Knight's not young, but I think fans would like to see them against the established longtime top guys more than seeing the top guys against each other yet again.
No, yeah, and I'm in total agreement. I don't have a whole lot to add there. It's time for a generational shift.
But use the current generation to give them that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You gotta use use the vault while it's still available.
I'm not trying to write off these top guys from being a main eventers. I'm saying match against the new younger guys.
You can extend their useful life as a star if you can match them up with fresh opponents. I mean, it's a formula that's been used over and over again in pro wrestling. Once the formula gets stale, you have to add new variables, and so that's what bringing these new stars in does.
This is too narrow of an example because it's NHL and not every fault. But like Nick Foligno was on the captain, I think the captain of the Chicago Blackhawks. He got traded to the Minnesota Wild, and he was the veteran leader for the young high draft picks on Chicago. A couple in particular are going to be the rising stars in the next generation. And now he got traded because he did his job. And now he's moving, somewhere else. And the Blackhawks have this young core, and their top draft pick, who's their star. He might be the captain now, maybe, but he needed Nick Foligno to be there for a season or two or three to make that happen. You don't need to know who I'm talking about to get what I'm saying. This is a time for the Punk, Roman, Drew, Seth, that generation to say, yeah, we're captains, but it really is our job to pass the torch of wisdom and the rub and all of that to them. Explore with F says, and welcome to the chat, Explorer. Do you really think Drew has gotten a true push to be included in that tier? And I would argue yes. I mean, he's wrestled Roman Reigns. He's feuded with Seth Rollins. He's feuded with CM Punk. He's feuded with Cody. I mean, yeah, Drew is. I mean, if you rank them, is he below almost all of them in terms of like a true WrestleMania Night 2 centerpiece, whatever? I mean, in a way, that's why we kind of said he's always a bridesmaid, not the bride in a lot of ways. But I'd still have him in that group, not the next group down. Do you agree, Jake?
Yeah, I think from just a natural talent perspective, Drew is in that top tier. Like he understands his character. He's very good on the microphone. He's got a natural charisma about him. He delivers in the ring. Like the only thing that really separates him from that very, very top tier, the Romans, the Punks, the Codys and Seth Rollins is maybe box office. Maybe he doesn't push as much merch. Maybe he doesn't sell as many streaming subscriptions. And is that due to the push, or is that due to some other factor? It's hard to know until they really get behind him. But I think he's so often, like I said earlier, the bridesmaid. He hasn't been allowed to crack that top tier and defeat those top level stars, and be seen at that level. And so it's hard to know until they give him that opportunity. But I think just based on his performances, he's earned a shot at it. And so I hope they eventually get him there. But I don't know if it's company politics. I don't know if it's he just hasn't sold himself well enough to the WWE executive team. I don't know what the answer to that question is. I'm not in those closed door meetings, but I think just from a viewer standpoint, I think Drew is probably top 5 in that company in terms of entertainment value minute to minute.
Yeah, he brings it. I mean, on the mic tonight, he was really good. His body language and interacting with Jacob Fatu was top guy stuff. I mean, I know there's some top people who don't see him as a top guy. I don't agree with that, but it's pretty evident in the way that he's pushed or not quite pushed all the way there's some sentiment there. But I don't know. I don't see that in crowd responses. I think it's selective and political more than rational and evident. Hockey B 597. Hope you liked my Nick Foligno Blackhawks analogy. Drew is better than Cody at every single aspect of the business besides selling garish t-shirts to children. Drew's
you heard it, Drew. Get some garish t-shirts. It's time.
Yes. I mean, he was a really earnest, good babyface. Like when Drew Galloway and TNA Impact Wrestling, he was like, that's a guy the fan. I mean, Drew was Cody before Cody in a lot of ways, and then COVID came. Back to my Nick Foligno tutoring or being a leader for the young guys in Blackhawks. Swole 74 goes, it's like Dirk Nowitzki with Luka for 1 year in Dallas. Another example of it. And probably more well-known, just a little bit older. Drew did beat Brock Lesnar in that COVID mania, says Rude Dog. Absolutely.
That was Mitchell, like 20 years ago, though.
And no crowd.
That's how it feels. Yeah, exactly.
Derek Mitchell says there's a puzzle piece missing from Drew's puzzle board, whether on the floor or hiding somewhere in the room. I mean, I think that's a belief. There's a lot he has going for him. Good size, good look, carries himself like a top guy, but there's an intangible puzzle piece missing. And who I think that's, I don't know what that is, or I'm not even vouching for that, but I think that's a fair framing of the perspective.
Well, I think you could make that argument for Cody and Seth too, if you wanted to.
I was thinking that. Yeah.
Like if the machine wasn't behind them in the way that they are, then there would be people justifying them not being there for the same reason, would be my answer to that.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Hockey B says the machine got behind Cody. That's a solitary reason he's viewed as more important than Drew by anyone. Good fella says Drew is a top guy. Wussy to not pull the trigger. Goodfella says Drew moves merch too. Powder Repeat said, I feel like a dominant heel champ run would have done Drew wonders. The time seems to have passed, and it is what it is. Fair enough. Oh, as far as Jacob Fatu goes, there's some good comments on him. Let me scroll back to them. Goodfella said, Jacob, tonight was different. Jacob on the mic. He was good. Tommy McLaughlin says, Jacob's promo had fire to it. Swole says, I love brooding Jacob more than crazy Jacob. Goodfella just says, Jacob versus Drew. I like it. This is a better version of Jacob Fatu. And even before he started talking in the ring, I was looking at him going, I could see that guy being ready if they had decided to push him for a headlining night 1 or night 2 against one of the more established top guys. I think that version of Jacob could have done it.
Yeah, no, I think he has that natural charisma piece of the puzzle too. He's got good physical charisma. I mean, he's not the most polished on the microphone, but he has the level of intensity that's required to kind of wallpaper over some of the less erudite moments on the microphone. But The over reliance on catchphrases is a little tiring at times, and I think that's probably the one weakness that I would identify and try to move on from if they can get there. But I mean, as far as matches go, like that I'm looking forward to most on the Mania card, the unsanctioned match with Drew and Fatu is at the top of my list. I think it's going to be a hell of a match, and I think they're going to go out there with something to prove, and I think it's going to be fun.
Two guys with chips on their shoulders for sure. Rude Dog says Cody versus Fatu would be money. They could still get there, especially if Cody turns heel. Tom McLaughlin, did I read this? Jacob's promo had fire to it. So yeah. Okay. What about? Well, let's just shift to Rhea and Jade, and now Jade's got her cohorts, BFAB and Michin. They explain themselves as much as I think is necessary in terms of why they linked up with her. I think Jade and Rhea has been the construct of a heel face dynamic that matches what Derek suggested earlier. Jade has been more cowardly. Rhea's been more alpha leader, stand up, come get me. I'll take on any of you. And now Jade is outnumbering her, and while claiming, she's not scared of her, she's making sure she has help. I think the Jade Rhea build has been really solid, and it's been done in a way that isn't like leaning on insider comments. They're not playing off of what they did on social media. They could have. They're not trying to make their hatred for each other feel more real than all the other stories being told on the show. And I'm just not a believer in that being a valuable place to go. I mean, if there's some reality you can work in, great, but don't force it. But also don't take me out of the realm that you tell in the rest of the show. And they're not. Everything they said is storyline related and canon. You don't need insider references or knowledge to make it work. And then the crowd response aligned with what the intention of the comments and the demeanor and the actions of these wrestlers are. So to me, I look at this as a template. What is working here that's not working elsewhere? And how do we apply that to other things, Jake?
Yeah, I think it's working. I don't know what the politics of their Twitter spat was, if that's legitimate, there's problems there, or if it's like an Unreal thing that they're trying to parlay into a future reality show or something. But there were definitely camps with an established backstory, and definitely some hurt feelings where someone's like, I don't want, I think Rhea just like, are we really doing this? I don't want to be part. I think Rhea's more on my side. Let's tell a story in canon. Let's not flail desperately to try to make this feel more real than everything else, even though there was some reality they were building on. I think that's what we saw there. And I think they showed some wisdom in just abandoning it. Yeah, fair point. I do like the structure of the story. I think Rhea being, the confident and hard-nosed babyface against a heel who is a bit narcissistic and deeply insecure about her own position as champion, surrounding herself with some goons to try to have the numbers advantage and take some of the pressure off of her. It all fits with the story that they've been telling with Jade since she's become the women's champion. And so I think, do I want to see, a WrestleMania title match end with a bunch of lousy interference? Not really. But I also look in the calendar and I see Backlash like 3 weeks after WrestleMania. And I'm like, yeah, we're probably going to get some screwy finishes at WrestleMania. It's probably unavoidable.
Yep. Some chat comments kind of backing up what we're saying here. Powder Repeat said, nice heat for the women. Swole 74 says, fewer catchphrases. Really, what is that? The bottom line, or do you smell what the Rudy Poo candy ass is cooking? All right. Derek Mitchell super chat says, I guess Jade, BFAB, and Michin are cosplaying TLC. Jade as T-Boz, BFAB as Chili, and Michin as Left Eye RIP. Thank you for the super chat, Derek. I don't know what I sort of know. I mostly don't know what you're talking about, but I get it to a degree. But I brought up Blackhawks and Nick Foligno, so it's okay. Pun LV says the back and forth between the women felt like there's still some animosity there. That might be true with knowledge that there's real animosity there, and then they decided to lean into it. The creative team said, "Hey, lean into that, go at each other, and that'll raise interest in your match." And then they just said, "No, let's not do." with that knowledge, yes, you can read into that. But if you didn't know any of that happened, this is just a well-built match that stays within canon. And that's the reality that I'm in favor of, is you don't need to have any knowledge, you don't have to feel like, well, this is actually real animosity. Every feud should feel that way, regardless of inside knowledge of whether it exists or not. Miz and Daniel Bryan fooled me, on that Raw post show. I thought they were like legit heat there. I was like, text me, is this legit? It seems like, Miz got really pissed at Bryan. Like, no, and they were just laughing out. They went off stage, they're laughing, congratulating each other. It doesn't matter if it's real or not. Just on the TV show, make it real. Make me feel it's real. And so it makes no difference to me if people really don't like each other, or they like each other and they're just good at acting. That shouldn't be entered into anything. Just tell a good story within the confines. If I watch a movie, I don't want to know if the hero and villain are friends or really don't like each other. It does not. Just give me a good story, well acted, with good writing, and good acting. I don't care if they really don't like each other or like each other. That's not what I watch entertainment for, is some reality behind the scenes making its way onto the screen. And I don't think pro wrestling is different enough to justify it. Jake, how are you on that? Because I know people disagree with me on that.
No, I think I'm more in your camp. I don't spend a lot of time investing in the off-screen conflicts. I mean, it's not something that enters into my mind about other avenues of fictional entertainment.
Yep.
Like I don't come away from scenes in films wondering if people had actual animosity with each other. It's like it's totally irrelevant to my enjoyment of the on-screen entertainment. And so I don't. I think there's been a lot of talk from Paul Levesque over the years about having to manage multiple metas, right? It's what's happening on screen and what's happening off screen, and how can we take advantage of both. And I think they overthink that to the point where it actually makes the television show worse. So I would prefer they just keep it on screen. Yeah,
managing multiple metas. And he has said that, and I literally can't not roll my eyes when I hear that.
Yeah.
You do not. I just think that's a guy in his 50s trying to stay cool, and instead of abiding by.
Needs to work in more buzzwords, synergy, and I don't know, so other business terms. Just throw them all in there.
Yeah. I mean, just it's okay to stand by what you believe the timeless universal framework of what makes pro wrestling work is, and not cave into the trendy stuff, so that you feel like not everything that's happening that's different today than 15 or 30 or 45 years ago needs to be a disruptor in a way that ultimately is unravels the foundation of what the culture of the presentation of pro wrestling just should always be. Social media has not affected how a good movie is made in terms of the final product. Nobody's going, well, there's all kinds of podcasts and YouTube shows, or back in the day blogs, or people on Twitter who have big followings who are going to critique this scene. So we better work into the scene in the movie, an acknowledgement in another metaverse, how you're not going to think this is good, but let's defensively acknowledge it so those people feel heard. It's just, I think I need a tooth extracted after saying that. It's just painful to tie yourself into that kind of nonsense. Just tell a good freaking pro wrestling story that you believe in. As Cody Rhodes famously said in AEW, you should not need to follow our shoulder content to understand anything that's on Dynamite.
Yeah, you can only do so much winking at the audience and fourth wall breaking before you become Monty Python, and they don't have the writing to be Monty Python, so they got to do something else.
Yeah, it's like the Scream movies were, referencing in a fun way old movies, but when people kept doing that, it kind of got hacked. It was a little hack. Yeah. All right. Goodfella says, I like Jade, B-Fab, and Meechin more tonight. Rhea, I need more. Yeah, I thought by the way, I thought B-Fab and Meechin fit in well. Jake.
Yeah. I don't know if it's like a callback to the baddies thing that Jade had done in AEW in a way, but I don't mind it here. I think B-Fab and Meechin are both pretty talented, and if they're getting some screen time and they can make it work, then I'm all for it.
Goodfella says, I think Jade is telling her side with a little sauce on it. Yeah, and I mean, this isn't like a good guy, bad guy thing behind the scenes between the two. I mean, there's people who like them both, and kind of, I think, I said it right away when the weekend this was happening. I said, Jade is not a villain in this. Like people are like, oh, let's root for the better workers who came up through the indie scene. But there was a little bit of a Mean Girls vibe to somebody who, was dropped into a political cauldron without kind of that heck, the Nick Foligno, the Dirk Nowitzki, that leader who would go, let me help you navigate this. I always had some sympathy for Goldberg, even though he did a lot to chip away at it with me, that he was dropped into the most toxic locker room situation that ever existed. And I talked to people at that time. Top wrestlers were like, oh, he's going to be in my camp. Basically like cajole and manipulate him into being with me politically, and I will guide him to the promised land, but it'll also benefit me. And there were all kinds of people going for that, and so many people were in his ear. And Jade had, there's a little bit of Goldberg with Jade, some parallels where there's a lot of people whispering in her ear, and a lot of people without her best interest in mind. And she was as green as Goldberg was in a lot of ways. And so there was a little bit of jealousy that manifested in ways that came across sort of unbecoming. And then Jade, of course, going to react to it with her personality, and I don't blame her for it. So that said, that does not have to be canon or storyline, and they all can be professional. And I was told, whatever is going on here is not going to lead to them not being able to work together, even if it got a little, flame war-y, I guess.
It was really kind of embarrassing for everybody involved, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And the fact that they were encouraging a social media spats to try to recreate, Tiffany and Charlotte or Becky and Charlotte. It's like, come on, grow up. Just be good at your job and do your job well, and focus on the majority, if not the vast majority of people who simply tune in for 2.5 or 3 hours to watch Raw and SmackDown, and they just want a coherent story with people who are cast in a way where you're actually rooting for them or against them based on the stories you're telling. If that's your foundation, get off social. I truly believe this. If everybody in the creative process in both companies got off all social media for a year, the wrestling product would be better a year from now. Yeah, I don't think it does any good. I think it does a little bit of good in terms of it's a focus group. So I want to augment that comment, but I think the bad overwhelms it by a massive degree. It's a distraction. It steers you off course. It gives you bad feedback that's ephemeral, a sugar rush feedback. Oh, we got all these hits, we got all these views, and it doesn't manifest into things that actually lead to an instant sell for WrestleMania and a positive vibe for your product.
Yeah, I think social media is it's become balkanized to the point where you're almost by default sort of putting yourself into an echo chamber, and I think you kind of lose sight of the larger audience in that process. If you get too hyper focused on trying to get a certain specific reaction from social media, you're just alienating a whole lot of other people by default.
Yep. Another super chat from Derek, so we got to take it. He says, WWE TKO is pushing Tony Hinchcliffe into the WWE sphere. I disagree with their politics and have no interest in participating in his involvement. Goodfella says, I'm going to watch the Kill Tony episode. I think Tony being part of it, and Jelly Roll being part of it, and Logan Paul being part, and the photos of Triple H, it was a presidential physical fitness thing. He might have been there if it was President Kamala Harris also, but obviously with his mother-in-law in the cabinet, the ties are obviously there. And Tony, I'm not going to stop talking about it. He stood up at a political rally that was worshiping a politician who got started by demonizing brown people, and making up completely out of just completely fictional racist ongoing thing about Obama has to produce a birth certificate to prove he's American because he doesn't look American to me, American enough. So unlike anyone else, he must produce a birth certificate. All that nonsense is you cannot deny that is not the genesis and the foundation of Tony's joke about Puerto Rico being a floating island of garbage. And, you can look it up. He apologized sort of, but not really, because the facts of the matter are there were, I can't remember if it was 14 or 42, but there are a bunch of projects to clean up like toxic land all over the United States. And one spot in Puerto Rico was part of that government fund, that government initiative to clean up environmentally dangerous spots where there was, yes, garbage. But in Tony's mind, it's a fun joke to tell at a dying white male far right MAGA rally, essentially a joke that further builds on the demonizing of brown people from what they talk about as if it's another country instead of part of their country. And I'm not going to forgive him for that until there's an actual apology, an actual correction of the facts and an understanding of why people are offended by that, not this blind, blind free pass that he gets because that's the type of humor he does. He goes, you can't be thin-skinned. Nothing is off out of bounds with him. It's like, that is a racist joke based on bad information in front of a crowd that has now turned away from ICE agents, yanking a guy who needed cancer treatment and putting him in a holding cell, and now he missed 3 of his cancer treatments and he's going to die. Like, there's dozens and if not hundreds of stories like this of jokes like that validating the racism and the misinformation and the I don't have what I deserve, so I have to find somebody to blame. And it's manifested in the ICE surge that in Minnesota that led to a whole arena full of AW fans chanting F ICE on Wednesday night when Brody King came out. So WWE has chosen to celebrate him, and I will not stop talking about how, and maybe there's been a sincere apology that I've missed, and I would love to hear it, and I will. And I'll recalibrate my view on him. But if I'm a WWE fan, I want WWE to not platform somebody who has yet to fully address and understand why that joke was so hurtful and dangerous and enabling of horrible things going on in this country and really historically. But that this is our time and this is what's happening now. So that is that's my take on that. Hockey B says, bravo for taking a stand against some level of the MAGA rot in this country. He says, amen,
Company.
Wade. What's that?
I think it was company. Not, I think you said country, but
well, Freudian slip. Yeah, go ahead.
I think they do have to be very careful in how strongly they attach themselves to. I mean, you can look at public polling. I mean, we're talking about a dying political movement at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's the more that they ingratiate themselves to it, I think it's just another failure to identify who their audience is, because I don't think the majority of WWE fans are MAGA in general. I mean, you hear that in the live crowds, and we've seen, as you mentioned, the F ICE stuff show up in AEW crowds, and I think maybe even Vince McMahon had a better handle on the politics of his audience than the current leadership of WWE does, as outlandish as that might sound.
He stopped telling people to go out and vote once he found out most WWE fans were voting Democrat. Then they stopped the Smackdown the Vote campaign.
Yeah. So I think it's it's at the point now where we can talk about this forever if you want, but there's at least a dozen things that happen on a weekly basis that you can chalk up to just absolute gutter racism from the current administration, and I think WWE associating themselves with it is pretty vile, and I hope they figure that out sooner than later, because I guarantee you that there's a fair number of people in that company who are just as disgusted with it as we are.
Amen. Well put. Absolutely. Faraz Malone said, if there's anything I've learned, a lot of MAGA people don't really stand for anything. Hockey B says, make a podcast about this. I'd subscribe. My Pilo Driver Pete says, MAGA wants to convince you that Kid Rock is peak. I can only imagine what the comedy would be. Yeah. All right. Rude Dog says, that Tony guy isn't funny, period. Hockey B says, yeah, comedy for 13-year-olds. But yeah, I mean, it is pragmatically speaking, Jake, it is dying. It is. Yeah. I mean, if it isn't clear now, I mean, it's obviously in the polls. It's showing. I mean, the fewer and fewer people are approving of this in so many different ways. And
it's a personality cult attached to a man who's clearly, at the tail end of his life.
Yeah.
So and he's only got a couple years left in the presidency, barring some newly unprecedented series of events that takes place.
He even said, "I'm at the end." I think today he said, "I'm near the end of my political career, so I can say this," or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I don't think that the movement, if you want to call MAGA a movement, survives Trump's retirement from politics. There's not another personality within it that can sustain the weight of it, and nobody is going to do obsequiously go out of their way to do what they do today for Trump, for JD Vance or Mike Johnson or any of those other sock puppets that we see on TV.
All that said, the fight is not over. Go protest tomorrow if you're aligned with this. Do some reading so you align with it. If you're not aligned with it, you're not reading enough or reading the right people. Because I mean, just it's so apparent. I did a screen capture the other day of and I have not been like obsessing on political social media much, but Derek Guy on Blue Sky said, kind of amazing that everything Trump does can be understood through the lens of narcissism and its related needs, such as self-aggrandizement, revenge, domination, grievance, validation. I don't think any character has been so one-dimensional, not even Wile E. Coyote or Scrooge McDuck. I mean, I just thought that summed up. For people who don't understand, like, why Trump just seems like a nice, reasonable guy when I see clips, or I don't know what people say who support him, or he hears me. It's like he would throw you under the bus for $10. But yeah, kind of amazing that everything Trump does can be understood through the lens of narcissism and its related needs: self-aggrandizement, revenge, domination, grievance, and validation. Just think about that every time you see him, any policy, anytime you read about his policy, anytime you hear him speak. It summarizes it, and it's
coincidentally the foundation for every great wrestling villain. Believe it or
not. Yes. Yep. Goodfella says Tony is not hilarious. The people he puts on are. Also, I don't believe Tony's bad. Maybe dumb. And fair enough. I am not into studying. I'm not going to study him. I just don't think he should be platformed after what he did until there's an actual apology. And I think he's bad for business for them, because I think he is. And I know they've co-opted the term and intentionally they've tried to subvert the term, but he is toxic, for a lot of people. JC Scooby says Tony's show will be canceled like last time they tried to do this. The guy is an a-hole.
I think he's got Netflix backing, so I don't think it's going to be canceled this time. I think it's going to end up on Netflix at some point.
Yeah. Well, it'll be different than it was last year when they were scared that it would get out. Okay, another super chat from Derek. Then we'll just kind of do some quick housekeeping wrap up here. Derek Mitchell says, WrestleMania 40. Thank you again, Derek, for the super chat. You're king of the super chats. And if anybody else wants to challenge him, be my guest or just join in. Don't worry about being the king. You can be the runner-up. WrestleMania 42 will be the first WWE main roster PLE since Elimination Chamber 2023, featuring Lashley against Lesnar, that will feature at least 2 Black stars in one-on-one matches. Wow. I've been thinking, watching the WWE product, like, and I know, Derek, and I told you, I get your concern. This, a year ago, whatever. But look at the pipeline. And when we look at, you look at tonight's show, and you see B-Fab, and you see Jade, and you see the Obafemi video package, and Trick Williams, Jovan. I mean, it is, and Bianca's
Carmella
not even
Hayes.
Carmel. Yes. I mean, I know I'm not being exhaustive here. And Bianca's not even around. She's not healthy right now. And I mean, this is like, I'm to defend Triple H. Like, when he was called out on this, I sort of thought, I mean, in his mind, he doesn't handle this stuff well. I mean, he just doesn't handle difficult questions well. It's not his specialty, and he sometimes does more damage. But I really do believe, as clumsy and awful as the way he defended himself was, essentially saying, I don't see color. It's like, don't say that. And if you don't know, you're not supposed to say that. Like, how do you not know that? But I get the spirit of what he was saying is, I'm just pushing the people who I think fans want to see, who will draw. And he kind of implied, like, we'll be fine. Just give me time. Like, give me a bigger sample size than the roster I inherited, and the pressure that I feel to not let business sink under my leadership, because there is a pipeline in place, not, I don't think, through strategy, but through more happenstance and just fair judgment of who the stars are and who has potential, that by 2028, things are going to be like really diverse in a way that I think is going to please a lot of people, Jake.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I think you can sum up Triple H's, I guess, political stance on the matter as a guy who stopped evolving on the subject in like 1997.
Yep.
And that's kind of his idea of what
he would still say if he sees a gay person, like, oh, not that there's anything wrong with that, and he would think that was witty. Like, that's how stuck he is. Like, that's how stunted his pop culture references are.
He's a progressive for somebody in the 90s. And so I think that's where he locked up. But I never got the impression that he was legitimately holding anybody back because of some sort of worldview. I think he was just sort of feeling like he was playing the cards that he was dealt in a way. And if you do look at the future of what WWE's talent pipeline looks like, it is a lot more multicultural. And I think that is a key to their future success, because despite, the efforts of the MAGA movement that we've been talking about, the future of the United States is multicultural, and you're going to have to appeal to a wide variety of people. And that's going to be key to WWE's future growth.
Yeah. And the vast majority want and understand the value in that diversity. And it's going to show up tomorrow in the biggest protest, I think in United States history in our 250 years. Four Eyes Malone says, WWE Black Talent is a perfect example in my head how people don't understand DEI. All we want is a fair shake. We're not asking for handouts. Talent will always overcome if treated properly. There are people against DEI who do not know what it stands for. They don't understand the spirit of its intent, and they certainly could not explain what's wrong with it without distorting it. And it's just, it's so simple. The people in power associate with other people like them generationally, and there's a certain inertia to it that can lead to some people being excluded from opportunity. And there should be policies in place still at Target that explicitly make sure that you're not going down a path that doesn't look widely for the best, most qualified talent that maybe aren't part of your high-end social club, that you don't see at in your same neighborhood, or didn't go to the same school with, or your dad didn't know, that your dad didn't know as a neighbor. Like, that's all it is. It's just broaden yourself out so the most qualified people get seen and get a chance. And it's not complicated, and it's also not controversial, and it's demonized by what? The white people who don't want to give up power. The white old men who don't want to give up power, and the ones who want to exploit people who are scared that that's going to hurt them, as opposed to be better for everybody. Jake, you want to add anything to that, or you think I got that wrong? Or is that
no? I don't think it's a coincidence that the biggest funders of all the anti-DEI rhetoric and campaign and political campaigns over the last couple of years have been white fleers of the former apartheid South Africa. I'll just put it that way.
There you go. Derek Mitchell says, well said. We're not asking for a handout, but the opportunity to showcase talents. Derek Mitchell also says, my skepticism has wavered from my initial concern with this current crop of talent, but I'm still in a wait and see mode. I trust Shawn Michaels more than Paul Levesque with booking stars, even though they are close friends. I don't know if I have reason to trust Michaels more than Levesque, to be honest. I don't have a strong stand either way on that. I just think NXT they want to succeed and push the best people they have who the crowd is reacting to. And that happens to right now include a crop of talent that was recruited in a way that reflects DEI initiatives, looking more broadly than they had in the past. I don't
think there's a massive difference between Michaels and Levesque in terms of their booking philosophy. I think people who argue otherwise are just kind of hallucinating. It seems like they're, if you look at, just in aggregate, I think they're very similarly minded, and they make use of the cards that they're dealt in a very similar way. So I think Shawn has a bigger crop of more diverse talent, and so that was more reflected on TV, and it was the opposite for what Levesque had at the main roster for the last couple of years.
If CM Punk ends up going to NXT and taking over for Shawn Michaels under a scenario that's in a loosely been floated as a possibility, and something Punk has hinted maybe he'd enjoy some kind of role like that, maybe not quite that formal, but maybe so. I'm real interested in what that would entail, and in terms of bringing a different perspective. I think Michaels is more of a disciple, understudy of Paul Levesque. I think he's more of a follower. I don't think he's, but I don't know. I mean, I think you're largely, I'm not disagreeing with you, Jake. I'd be curious to see a different kind of voice and a different kind of world outlook get in at the grassroots level of WWE. There's super chat I need to get to here because I promise I will. Nima Pazar says, Wade, what's the logic behind WrestleMania being in late April? These last 2 years, it feels like it should be next week. I think a lot of things are at play. Some of it, I think, was, God, Todd Martin just talked about this and rattled off because he had just had him at the tip. So there's go ahead, Jake. Tell me why you think it's late April, and I'll kind of try to rejiggle my memory on. But there's like 3 or 4 kind of key reasons that ended up a little bit later.
I remember the conversation last year being that they took a weekend that was otherwise very down for business in Vegas, so that they wouldn't have to compete with a lot of other major events that were taking place in the month of April. And so I don't know if that's the same this year or not, but I think they took a week that was historically fairly low revenue in Las Vegas, and they're trying to make it, a WWE weekend for that purpose.
Yeah. I think also they want to avoid NCAA conflict. There's, I don't think they see a downside for travel if the weather's, well, in Vegas doesn't matter, in New Orleans doesn't matter, but yeah. The idea that it should be next week is I said that's why my dogs think they should be fed at 3 instead of 2, or 1 instead of 2. When the clock moves an hour, they're confused because they don't know the clock's moved. They just know their inner clock says, where is the sun? So we have this inner clock, but I mean, I don't care. I don't care if WrestleMania is early April or late April or March 30th or April 18th, or I'm fine with it if they. The pace to the stories, you don't want to drag it out where you're burned out on it. But I think some of the impatience with the pacing of WrestleMania storytelling is just, it's hard to believe it's still 3 weeks away when we're at the end of March. Yeah. Just seeing if. Yeah. So, okay. Bree, Nikki, and Charlotte and Alexa, any quick thought on that, Jake? We didn't cover that.
I mean, it was just an excuse to get the other teams on the show, and clearly they're setting up some sort of like 5 or 6 team scramble type match for the women's tag belt. So, I mean, it was fine for what it was, but nothing special.
Yep. Yeah. I don't have a lot to say about it either. Danhausen, how have you liked him, and what do you think about this week?
I think they're making proper use of Danhausen. He's not on TV for an extended length of time. He gets in a couple of quick phrases and curses somebody, and then he's out. They're not overusing him to where you would think it was obnoxious, and he's not all over the screen. So I think it's good. If
you don't like him, he's not on enough to really gripe a lot. Like, it is just a quick little segment. And if you like him, like you said, they're not burning him out. And not every week's going to be as funny as his average week, but I think I'm going to pretty much enjoy everything he does. And I think he inherently is going to be, it's unfair for R-Truth to say this because R-Truth's been having to come up with stuff for years, but I think he will hit more often percentage-wise than R-Truth, because I think there's a little bit more cleverness to Danhausen than R-Truth, although I think R-Truth his cleverness is underrated. In part because there's sort of some, racial historical undertones to him kind of playing the role that he does to make a largely white roster laugh at his easily misunderstanding things. But I have people who are very, very liberal or very, I don't want to use that term, but who would be really first in line to call out racism, who are like, no, the R-Truth thing isn't that, you get why people think that, but he's just funny. Like he's good. But let's hold it there. Danhausen, I think, has something that people are going to want to see him in different circumstances, and it won't feel like they're forcing jokes. Like, I'd say 2 out of 3 weeks, R-Truth feels like they're forcing something that isn't that funny, and it's just the best they could come up with. And Danhausen, I feel like you could drop him with no prep into a random segment each week, and he would make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, R-Truth is very much, he kind of plays stuff in the same way that, but I guess it's a little bit different. But like Steve Carell, for instance, like Steve Carell is excellent at playing comedic characters that are extremely frustrated by their inability to understand things. And R-Truth is a guy who just delights in his obliviousness to everything, and it's kind of the same but different. And so I've never identified R-Truth as a racist sort of caricature. I don't think it's ever really been played that way. But I do think Danhausen, he seems to be. He makes outrageous demands, he curses somebody, and then he leaves. Like, I think it's a very simple, straightforward act, and it's going to sell a lot of merch, and I think that's why they brought him in the first place.
And the curses are not actually causing like supernatural things to happen. Like, they're smart. It is self-fulfilling prophecies. It is fear. It is making more out of something than you should. It is astrology. You are willing something into existence through your perception or your misperception of something that would have happened anyway, or you made happen. Nobody who steps on gum thinks they're cursed unless they were cursed right before they stepped on gum.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Anything else from tonight's show, Jake, did you want to bring up before we sign off? I don't know if we had Tiffany and Julia. Anything about anything?
Yeah, I guess I was surprised to see Julia get the win, honestly. I don't know if that means they have bigger plans. I'm still waiting for Julia to click in a way as a personality. Like, I think she has enough in the ring to where you're like, yeah, she is, doesn't stand out in a bad way. And I think she can have decent matches with the right opponents. But there's just something, it's like an empty vessel. Like, I do not know who Julia is at all. Right. And they don't seem like they're committed to telling me. And I guess I'm just left to guess at this point.
Yep. Derek Mitchell said, I've been a fan of Danhausen segments in short doses while R-Truth plays the step and fetch it roles. As you said, Wade, it does have some racial stereotype overtones. And you can't ignore it, but you ought not ignore that there are some similarities in that should be concerning. But the spirit of it, and Ron Killings himself, it's not trying to exploit that in its intent. And I think there's a sophistication to his humor that goes beyond it. But it's, I understand people being uncomfortable with it. Tagar Laga in the chat says Danhausen's been the most consistent, despite mainly being in backstage segments. Pun LV19 says that R-Truth Judgment Day skit was hilarious. Building a new set. Damian, who makes Damian Priest is a good foil for R-Truth. I am not against those two being together. I mean, Priest, I'm trying to think of like a pop culture comparison. I wish something was coming to mind where there's the guy who just kind of looks at the guy, and he looks at Truth endearingly. He's tolerant. He's patient. He gets a kick out of him. And he in his heart, he likes him because he has a good heart, but he is a little frustrated by some of his,
it's a straight man and the goofball in a comedy act, right? Like Priest is very much the straight man in this scenario where
who are examples? There's so many out there. I just can't pull one up.
I'm like Steve Martin and Martin Short. Like, it just, one where a guy, is an absolute lunatic, and one where the guy is just frustrated by him, but also loves him in a way that's, unconditional. Like, I just think it's like they're a pretty good team that way.
As far as Julia goes, just to the last point you were bringing up, Jake, before threw in some chats, Hockey Beast says Julia does not understand you need to be an actor to be successful, a successful WWE star. Facial expressions and reactions and emotions. She's in the wrong company if she just wants to be able to work good matches and have that be the only thing that ever matters. Yeah, for sure. Powder Repeat says, Priest and Rhea, Priest and Truth. Seems like he does his best working off of someone. He is like, that's not a flaw. That's a feature. That's like, he is, some people are better playing off of other people than they are just standing alone and doing their thing. So yeah. Okay, Julia. Rudog says, Julia seems like she's on another planet. Forrest Malone says, Julia looks like you'd be entertained until she gets in action. And Pun LV says, crowd seemed dead for the match until the end. Anyway, Jake, any final comments before we log off here?
I don't think so. I think we covered everything. I guess I'm hoping they can turn some of these builds around in the next 3 weeks. You know, I'd love to be looking forward to WrestleMania a lot more than I am currently.
Yep. Well, very good. Thanks, Jake. Check them out at prowrestling.net. Make it a weekly scheduled podcast here. Jake Barnett and Jason Powell talk for an hour or two about the big topics in pro wrestling with some insight and scoops. Just intelligent analysis that won't insult your intelligence, isn't bombastic. It's a brand that I am a fan of, and you can support what they do. PWMembership.net is a good way to show appreciation for the time that they give the Wade Keller shows too. PWMembership.net. Don't forget, we have our membership, VIP membership, PWTorch.com/GoVIP. And there are many ways to sign up through Patreon, which links up with Spotify, through your Apple account, and also just credit card, debit card, or PayPal. All that's detailed at PWTorch.com/GoVIP. We have a WrestleMania RSS feed that reviews just about every WrestleMania in history, either retro lookbacks or the contemporary same night roundtables. That it comes with the full VIP membership. You can access those on a customized RSS feed. So if you want to march through WrestleMania history and hear me hosting the vast majority of those shows, either the lookbacks or the contemporaneous same night of reviews, we've got decades of them available to you instantly when you go VIP. So check it out. If you're not going VIP, at least support our free shows. We obviously, it's a big part of what we do, and we appreciate you doing that. Search Wade Keller, search PWTorch to subscribe. Don't forget to like this show. If you're still with us, please like it right now. Also add a little comment, just any aside, say good show, or comment on something that we did about SmackDown. And also please subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. Also, we're always looking for volunteers to help round out our coverage. There's so much going on in wrestling. We need a team. We've got a great team of volunteers who help us out. You can be one of them. KellerWade@gmail.com is the email if you're interested in helping us out with an assigned weekly slot that is either empty or we create just for you. We appreciate that. And yeah, I think that's about it. Go check out my report at pwtorch.com if you haven't yet. And let's see what the chat is saying as we sign off here. Peace, y'all, says Four Eyes Malone. We'll throw up any final words from the chat in our closing credits here. Thanks, everybody.